Are we live? I think we're live. Hello everyone and welcome back to my end-to-end hockey live trade deadline video. In today's video we're going to go through all the moves that are leading up to trade deadline. I'm going to be with you here for the next 2-ish hours until around 1:30ish to discuss all the trades that happen during this time frame before the trade deadline happens. There's planning on being a lot of big movements. So just a couple of quick things to talk about with you guys. My Wi-Fi is not the greatest, so if I buffer or if my live stream cuts out, I do apologize. I will try and if the live stream does cut out, rehook up the live stream. And I'm sorry if it's buffering a little bit during certain points in this live stream. Hopefully it's better than the last time I did it, but God willing, we'll see what happens in today's video. On top of that, I'll also be doing a couple of other things. I'll be looking at my phone, looking at my computer, just sort of seeing what other things are out there right now. So we're going to have to wait and see. I've mentioned that I'm going to do a live stream at around 11:30. I decided to do it a little bit earlier because there have been quite a few moves, including around last night, which I'm going to get to here in just a couple of minutes. And like I said, trade deadline's at 1 p.m. I'm going to stay with you guys until around 1:30 p.m. to try and just go through all the things that have happened. So there's going to be a couple of times where I just look at my phone or do something like that, so I'm not going to be talking all the time, but I'm going to be breaking as much big news to you guys as I possibly can during this stream. And definitely love to hear you guys to check it out. Leave a like down below, leave a chat down in the chat. Would love to hear your guys' opinion on all that's going to happen here today. So if you haven't already, love to hear your guys' opinion on all of this stuff. So in today's video, like I talked about, we're doing a live trade deadline video. Interesting stuff here. So we're going to start with some of the moves that happened last night. There are actually quite a few big moves that happened yesterday night. Now, yesterday we talked about this. I just posted a couple of videos. You can check them out on my channel for more in-depth analysis on moves that happened earlier early yesterday. But we talked about in those two videos about how Brian Dumoulin was moved with 50% of his contract retained to New Jersey for a second-round pick, and Traff Herman. That was a standing move there for the Anaheim Ducks. So that was a pretty good pickup there for Anaheim. The San Jose Sharks moved Nico Sturm to the Florida Panthers, as well as a 7th-round pick for a 4th-round pick. So that wasn't an overly big one, but the Panthers get a 4th-line center upgrade, really good face-off guy, and he's going to be a really solid 4th-line center. But we talked about that in one of our previous videos. We also talked about Riley Smith going back to the Vegas Golden Knights, and in exchange the Rangers getting Brendan Brisson and a 2025 3rd-round pick for retaining half of Riley Smith's contract. We also talked about how Driedger and Kakkonen were flipped as the Jets and Panthers swapped 3rd-string goaltenders. So interesting note there. And we also talked about how Carson Soucy was dealt by Vancouver to the New York Rangers in exchange for a Sharks 2025 3rd-round pick that they acquired in that video in that trade with Vegas for Riley Smith. So definitely love to see your guys' opinion on all that stuff. Like I said, leave a comment, leave a chat down below. Love to hear your guys' opinion, but we have seen a couple more intriguing moves. We'll start with all the moves that happened yesterday. So first, one that I never got around to talking about, but did wind up going down. I talked about this in my last video as a potential option that could wind up happening before today, and that was that the Minnesota Wild and Boston Bruins have hooked up on a deal. The Minnesota Wild have acquired Justin Brazeau in exchange for Marek Kuznetsov, Jacob Lauko, and a 2026 6th-round pick. Now, this is an interesting move there. I think the Bruins by far win this deal because even though Brazeau is a really good bottom 6 forward, I think Kuznetsov eventually is going to be a solid at least 3rd-line center. Maybe he's not right now, but I think eventually he's going to be. Both guys that go to Boston and also the guy who goes to Minnesota are all in the final year of their deals, and all are making less than $1 million, so it's interesting to note there. Brazeau's at league minimum. He's in the final year of a 2-year contract. He's 27 years old. He plays that Boston style, rough and tumble, big hard-hitting type game that Boston really loves, although they weren't able to re-sign him. So he's going to Minnesota. He sort of fits the same role that Lauko does. Apparently the Wild were really concerned about the Lauko injury situation, so they brought in Brazeau to be a sort of definite improvement on Lauko. He's definitely going to be a lot more healthier, hopefully, and I think that could be a really healthy body on that bottom 6 from Minnesota. So although it's a lot to give up, I do really like Brazeau and his potential fit in the Wild organization. When it comes to Boston, like I said, Kuznetsov I think eventually will be a great 3rd-line center in the Boston Bruins organization. He hasn't put up overly a great amount of points this year. Just let me double check on this. Kuznetsov so far this year has only put up 2 goals and 7 points in 50 57 games. So, like I said, not as overly great production so far this year, but I think long-term, a solid third-line center, I think this could be a really good pickup there for the Boston Bruins. So they get Kuznetsov. They also get Lauko. I think Lauko left Boston either last year in the offseason or the year prior. He's a really solid bottom six forward. Like we said, he has a whole bunch of injuries this year, which has kept him out of a lot of game action for Minnesota. So that was a really bad blow there for the Wild, so they move him to Boston. If he can stay healthy, he can play that similar style of game that Brazil is playing in Minnesota. So interesting note there, but Boston has reacquired Jacob Lauko after moving on from him last offseason, and they also get a 2026 sixth round pick. So this is a pretty good pickup there for the Bruins. It's not going to be an overly huge draft addition, but it does give them a little more draft capital, which I do think will help them during this time frame. So interesting note there, but we do see an interesting trade last night that saw Boston and Minnesota wind up hooking up on a deal that surrounded Justin Brazeau. On top of that, we also saw a couple more interesting trades last night. We saw a blockbuster just before I was going to bed, and that was between the Colorado Avalanche and New York Islanders, involving the 7th player on my trade bait list, and that is Brock Nelson. As we talked about, this is my top 20 trade bait list, 1 to 10, 11 to 20, so I'll try and edit this as much as I can once guys get dealt. I already have Nelson going to Colorado because that happened last night, so I was able to get that before today's action, but there has been a couple of guys who are in my top 20 who have been dealt, so we'll touch on that in a minute. But I do want to touch on the fact that Brock Nelson, who is 7th on my list, is heading to Colorado in a blockbuster deal. The trade is as follows: the Colorado Avalanche acquired Brock Nelson and William Dufour from the New York Islanders in exchange for young prospect Callum Ritchie, depth defenseman Oliver Shillington, a conditional 2026 first round pick, and a conditional 2028 third round pick. So this is a really great addition there for the Avalanche, but a massive haul for the Islanders. We'll start with the Avalanche side of things. They're going for it again this year, even though they are the first wildcard team in the Western Conference. They traded Rantanen early in the year, but they're making moves because they are going for it yet again. They want to win another cup, and they needed a center upgrade. We've talked about this before. Middlestead has not worked out overly well as a second line center in the Avalanche organization this year. They want a true number 2 center, and they're getting that here in Brock Nelson. Now, Nelson does have half of his contract retained by the Islanders, so he's only going to the Avalanche at a $3 million cap hit, which is pretty good. Now, I'm not sure if the Avalanche will re-sign him after this year. I think there's a very likely chance that Nelson will hit the free agency market. I've seen some people say that the AAV on that 3-year extension the Islanders were offering Nelson ranges anywhere from between $5.7 to $7.5 million. I'm not exactly sure what the true AAV was, but it does sound like Nelson really just wanted to test the free agent market. So he's going to go chase a cup in Colorado. I think Nelson will be a solid second-line center. He can play with a guy like maybe Lehkonen, maybe Natchez if they want to try and break up McKinnon and Natchez, try and get some more depth scoring. He could play with a guy like Jonathan Drouin. He could be a really solid second-line center. And as we've seen in years past, he's a really good goal scorer, consistent 20 to 30 goal scorer in the Islanders organization. So the Avalanche are getting themselves a true second line center here in this deal. They also get William Dufour. I'm a guy who's really high on William Dufour. He's a really good prospect. I think he was a former 4th overall pick. I think it was a former 4th round pick in the recent memory. He's only 23 years old. He's in the final year of his ELC. I feel like in time, Dufour could be a really solid top 9 prospect for the Avalanche. So even though it's not an overly important ad, I do think Dufour long term could be a really solid top 9 addition for the Avalanche, even though he's probably going to stay in the AHL this year. So an interesting pickup there for the Avalanche. But for the Islanders, man, do they get a massive return here. They get Callum Ritchie. Ritchie was the, hold on a minute here. Ritchie was the 27th overall pick in the first round in the 2023 draft, so he's only a year and a half removed from his draft. He is looking like a phenomenal draft prospect. He's a center, might be able to play a wing at the NHL level, but he can score a whole bunch of goals, and he was one of the top prospects in the Avalanche organization. So this is a great pickup for the Islanders, getting a solid prospect in Callum Ritchie. They also acquired Oliver Shillington. Now, as we'll talk about in a minute, Shillington's time in New York was short-lived, but he's a solid depth defenseman, can play on the 6th sixth, can play as like a sixth or seventh defenseman, can play on the third pair. Definitely dealt with his fair share of injury troubles and mental health problems over the past couple of years, but he's definitely rounded out into a solid third pair defenseman this year, even though he still has some trouble staying healthy. So interesting note there. The Islanders also get 2 conditional draft picks in this deal. Now hold on, let me check the conditions on them. The 2028 third round pick is only going to be moved to the New York Islanders if the Colorado Avalanche win this year's Stanley Cup and Brock Nelson plays 50% of the playoff games. So the Avalanche have to be the 2025 Stanley Cup champions, and Nelson has to play in at least half of those playoff games for Colorado for that third round pick in 2028 to be dealt. If that doesn't happen, if the Avalanche get bumped in like one of the earlier rounds, or if Nelson doesn't play in 50% of the Avalanche's games, then the third round pick will stay in Colorado. But the first round pick's condition is that if the first round, hold on. So the condition on the Colorado Avalanche's 2026 first round pick is if the first round pick is in the top 10 this year and Philadelphia gets a 2026 first rounder, or if next year's first round pick for the Avalanche is also a top 10 protected first round pick. So if the Avalanche get a top 10 pick next year, then the pick will transfer to an unconditional 2027 first round pick. So the Islanders are usually getting a top 10 protected pick next year or an unconditional 2027 first round pick if either the Flyers get this year's first round pick for the Avalanche, if either the Flyers get next year's first round pick for the Avalanche or the Avalanche's first round pick next year is in the top 10. So interesting thing there, but it's either going to be a first round pick in 2026 or 2027. They get Callum Ritchie, they get Oliver Shillington, and potentially a 2028 third round pick for moving on from Brock Nelson. I know Lamoriello has taken a lot of heat for not moving off players when they're bubble teams, but I think he really hit home on this one. Even though he tried to sign Nelson, after that didn't work out, he made a monumentally big trade for the Colorado Avalanche and the New York Islanders. So interesting note there. On top of that, we saw a couple more trades happen from over the past little while. We got a couple more interesting ones that happened last night. Let me go over to check on those ones. So yesterday night, we also saw, just after this trade, the New York Islanders flip Oliver Shillington. They moved him to Anaheim for a future consideration. So it's nothing more than a cap dump. Shillington's making just over $1 million. So to see him be dealt to Anaheim, not too surprising there. And I think in Anaheim, he could be a solid third pair defenseman. They just moved Brian Dumoulin, so they need some more veteran presence on that blue line. So it's an interesting swap there. The Islanders have a plethora of defensemen. They don't need Shillington, and the Ducks could have used another guy. The Islanders free up some cap space, and the Ducks get a decent player for the rest of the season. So an interesting swap there, but the Islanders, after acquiring him, flipped Shillington to the Ducks for future considerations. And then that deal that I was talking about in one of my recent videos that I just posted between the Oilers and the Sharks, that deal did happen, and the trade is as follows. The Edmonton Oilers acquired Jake Wallman with no contract retention, so at a full $3.4 million cap hit from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for a conditional 2026 first round pick and prospect Carl Berglund. So this is an interesting move for both sides. Berglund, I think, recently just came over from college. He's in the second year of a 2-year ELC, I think it was, with an AAV of $950,000. He's going to be an RFA at the end of the deal. He's a center. Like I say, he's 25 years old, so he might not eventually get out to very much, but I think he could eventually be a solid, maybe bottom 6 forward there for the Sharks. So interesting note there, but they get a young prospect in Berglund. They also get a first round pick. Now hold on, let me check on the conditions on this. Okay, so the condition on the San Jose Sharks first round pick from the Edmonton Oilers is it's top 12 protected. So the simple thing is that the Edmonton Oilers trade their first round pick in next year's draft, the 2026 draft, and it's top 12 protected. However, if the Oilers wind up dealing their 2027 first round pick today and they don't have that 2027 first round pick that could be transferred if the Oilers finish in the top 12 next year, then the Sharks will wind up having an unprotected 2026 first rounder. So it's a top 12 protected 2026 first rounder for the Edmonton Oilers that they moved to San Jose, unless they trade their 2027 first rounder, in which case it becomes an unprotected 2026 first rounder. So interesting note there, but the Oilers do give those Sharks a really interesting piece. Now it's probably going to be a lower end first round pick, but the amount of skill that Will Greer is showing here, like he acquired a second round pick for, as well as Jake Walman, just for taking on Jake Walman's contract from Detroit in the offseason. Like he acquired Walman and a second round pick for future considerations. He's just moved Walman for a first round pick and a decent prospect in Berglund. So they get a second round pick, a first round pick, and Carl Berglund for nothing. This is a beautiful piece of work there from Will Greer. When it comes to Jake Walman in Edmonton, he's going to be a solid player there. Now, he's an offensive style defenseman, not something I think the Oilers obviously need. I think they need more of a defensive style defenseman, but as a left shot defenseman, he's 29 years old. He can really play well on that team. He's currently has a career high 6 goals. Well, not a career high 6 goals, but he has 6 goals and a career high 32 points in 50 games in San Jose. His previous career high was 21 from last year. He blew his career high out of the water in San Jose. Now, he can be a solid second, third pair defenseman. He's not a rental. He can be for this year and next year for Edmonton. But like I said, I don't think they need an offensive defenseman. They need someone who's more on the defensive side of things. So, an interesting trade there. I wasn't expecting Walman to get moved. Like, Nelson was 7th on my trade bait list, and Brazeau was 24th on my trade bait list. Like Walman, I wasn't expecting to get moved because he's still a year left and was fitting in so well in San Jose. But I mean, if you're getting a first round pick for Walman, you really got to do that. So all in all, interesting trade there between the Sharks and the Oilers. But we do see that the Sharks have acquired moved Jake Walman to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for a first round pick. So a brilliant piece of move there for the Oilers and the Sharks. Those are all the moves we saw yesterday. So we have seen a handful of deals happen earlier today, and there were some interesting ones. So first up, we saw the Washington Capitals and Pittsburgh Penguins for a second time this year hook up on a deal, and it was surrounding Penguins forward Anthony Beauvillier. The trade is as follows. The Washington Capitals have acquired Anthony Beauvillier with no retention from the Pittsburgh Penguins for their 2025 second round picks. This is an interesting move here for the Penguins and the Capitals. For the Capitals, they don't really want to tinker too much with this elite unit that they've built so far this year that has them in the top spot in the Eastern Conference and one of the top teams in the league. So there was a lot of speculation that they would just try and tinker around the edges, maybe add some depth into their forward group or their defensive end. And that's what Beauvillier brings. He's a solid third line, maybe fourth line forward. He can put you up some depth scoring. He showed that last year in the playoffs with Nashville and over the past couple of years with NYI. So I think that could be a really good pick up there for the Capitals. You fit Beauvillier on like the third line with, I don't know, maybe a guy like Protas, Dubois, Mangiapane. Like, I don't know who he'd play with, but if you put him on the third line as a wing spot, I think that could be a really good pickup there for the Washington Capitals. Well, the Penguins, you do this deal all day. A second round pick for Anthony Beauvillier. I think the Canucks moved Beauvillier for like a fourth round pick last year at the trade deadline. This is a fantastic pickup there for the Penguins as the Penguins continue to sell off pieces and continue to make fantastic stellar moves. So all in all, I obviously think this is a complete win for the Penguins because a second round pick for a third or fourth line forward, all day, you're taking that to the bank if you're a Pittsburgh Penguins. So really good move there we saw earlier today. Beauvillier was, I think, 38th on my trade bait list, so another guy who's off my trade bait board. But Beauvillier has been dealt to the Washington Capitals as they add some depth to their team. Then we saw another trade happen. This one between the Kings and the Flyers. Now, I've been hearing a lot of rumblings about the Kings going after a big player this year at the trade deadline, trying to really improve this team to try and beat the Edmonton Oilers in what could be a potentially another first round matchup. And this one's an interesting one. It's not an overly huge one, but it's interesting as the LA Kings have acquired Andrei Kuzmenko and the Philadelphia Flyers 2025 7th round pick from the Flyers with 50% of his contract retained in exchange for a 2027 third round pick, which is the Los Angeles Kings. Now, I'll get to the analytics here in a minute. Just want to touch on a couple of things first. So all in all, if you're the Flyers, you do this. So all in all, if you're the Flyers, you do this deal all day. I mean, this is a very fantastic pickup. A third-round pick for Kuzmenko after already getting a second-round pick in the trade that acquired him is pretty good. Now, it's a couple of years down the road. By that time, the Kings might be a super team, and there might be a very low third-round pick, or the Kings might have fallen off a little bit, and it might be a high third-round pick. I'm not exactly sure. It's 2 years off. But it's another draft pick that the Flyers do have in their arsenal that they will be able to use and be able to capitalize on. So interesting to note there, but the Flyers do wind up getting a third-round pick. For the Kings, it's not the big upgrade I think many Kings fans were hoping, and I'm not sure if the Kings might make another move later on to the day, but they do wind up acquiring here a pretty solid player. Hold on. But they do wind up acquiring here a pretty solid player in Kuzmenko. Now, he's going to fit in the middle six. He only comes to them at a $2.75 million cap hit, so it's not too bad. He hasn't had the best of seasons this year, like in Calgary and Philadelphia. Last year in Vancouver, like he's definitely had a downward trajectory. His first year in Vancouver was stellar, putting up 35 goals. And last year, after being acquired by Calgary, also had a pretty stellar finish to the season. But just he never really has a really good stretch after that little bit that he has when he arrives to a new team. Like, first year in Vancouver, fantastic. Last year in Calgary, fantastic. But the following seasons, not doing overly good. I don't think the Kings will probably sign him. I think this is most likely just going to be a rental. And I think Kuzmenko could put up some really solid offensive stats. Like, the Kings have a really deep forward group. Put him with a guy like Deneau, Byfield, Fiala, Laferriere. I think you put together some really good goal scoring totals in the Los Angeles organization. And the Kings also get a 7th round pick in this year's draft. It's not an overly big pick, but they will be able to get some more depth on their forward group. So interesting to note there. I mean, depth in their draft capital. So interesting to note there, but the Kings have acquired Andrei Kuzmenko for a 7th round pick and a 7th round pick in 2025 for a 3rd round pick in 2027. So interesting trade here. Got a couple of things to check on here. Just give me a minute, and then we'll touch on a couple more trades that we saw from earlier today. Okay, so I'm just going to look up some of the potential rumors we're hearing right now. Leafs apparently have acquired Scott Laughton. We'll get to that deal once more announcements have come up. It sounds like the Dallas Stars are indeed acquiring Mikko Rantanen, so not official yet, but there was a lot of talk last night that Mikko Rantanen was going to get dealt to the Dallas Stars. It sounded like there was some trade talks picking up. Then it sounded like it was hinging on a Mikko Rantanen extension. Then it sounded like there was not going to be an extension, and it sounded like the trade was sort of falling apart. And then it sounded like the Stars had actually come to terms on something around like an 8-year deal with a $12 million AAV. I'm not exactly sure if that's the official cap hit, but we're going to have to wait and see on that. And now it sounds like there's going to be a Mikko Rantanen deal. We'll touch on that once there's more info on it, but it does sound like Mikko Rantanen is heading to the Dallas Stars, which is just going to bolster that Dallas Stars forward group. And on top of that, potentially a first-round matchup we could see is Dallas-Colorado. Imagine Rantanen playing his former team in the first round. That would be interesting. So this is going to be an interesting deal. It sounds like Stankoven might be amongst the players that are getting dealt to Carolina. So interesting note there. apparently Carolina, according to Panoda, is looking to add some middle six forward help. After moving Rannon, you'd expect them to try and be adding some more forwards. So it'll be interesting to see if there's anything else that happens with the Carolina Hurricanes today. After moving Rannon, I would think they'd be wanting to go after a forward. Part of me thinks maybe a guy like Brock Nelson, or not Brock Nelson, Brock Besser, maybe a guy like Jared McCann, maybe Luke Kunin, even though he's more of a bomb six guy, so we'll have to wait and see. But it seems like Carolina might be a team who has some interest in trying to make a big splash. On top of that, we do have a couple of other things. Luke Schenn has been dealt. That's one of the deals I'm about to get to. We saw him be dealt 2 days ago. Did a separate video about that. He does dealt by Nashville to Pittsburgh, but he's now been flipped. I said that was a possibility at that point in time, and he's now a member of the Winnipeg Jets. So we'll get to that in a minute. Just give me a couple more seconds here to check on a couple of other things. Okay, so some more trades that happened earlier today. Let's try and get through all of these before more deals happen. So we saw a blockbuster between my two pennants here, and that's the Senators and the Sabres. I will change out the pennants if there's some big, massive blockbuster deals that do happen. Like I might change one of them for the North Stars in the very near future, just given the fact that Dallas wound up making that big trade for Rannon. But we did see a deal between these two teams that involves a couple of interesting pieces, including, hold on, including number 10 on my trade bait list, and that's Dylan Cozens. Dylan Cozens, Dennis Gilbert, and the Sabres' 2026 second-round pick have been dealt to the Ottawa Senators for Jacob Bernard-Docker and Josh Norris. Now, Norris is also on my trade bait list, a little bit lower. I think he's 28th, but he was also on my trade bait list. So two guys on my trade bait list who I thought was very likely to get dealt this today do wind up getting dealt. Now, this is an interesting move for the Sabres. Jacob Bernard-Docker is something that the Sabres do not have a whole bunch of, and that's a right shot defenseman. Now, he's more of a third pair guy right now, might eventually be able to grow into like a second pair type defenseman, so it's an interesting pickup there for the Sabres. I don't think he'll ever be more than a second pair defenseman. He's already 24 years old. He had a lot of injury troubles this year, so hopefully he can stay healthy in Buffalo, and if he does, that could be a fantastic pickup there for the Sabres long term. They also get Josh Norris, who is in the third year of an 8-year contract with AV of $7.95 million. Had a really good season right before he signed that contract, but since then has had trouble staying healthy. Had a couple of injuries 2 years ago, a couple of injuries last year, but in and out of the lineup this year due to injuries as well. He has the potential to be a solid 30, 35 plus goal scorer and maybe a 60 to 70 point player, but just hasn't been able to do that without much he's been injured. So hopefully for Norris' sake, he's able to stay healthy now. He goes to Toronto, he goes to Buffalo. He winds up being a second line center there. I think that could be a really good pickup there for the Sabres behind Thompson. So interesting note there, but the Sabres have acquired Norris and Bernard-Docker. Meanwhile, for the Senators, who are one of my favorite teams and wanted them to make some sort of move, didn't really want them to move Norris because I really do like Norris in Ottawa, but they do get a little bit better here, I think, longer term especially, in getting Dylan Cozens. Now, Cozens is in the second year of a 7-year deal with an AAV of $7.1 million. So both guys have 5 years left after this year. However, Cozens is $850,000 cheaper than Norris is, and he's a year younger. So they do get a little bit more youth. They get a little bit more cap space, and I think that could be really good for Ottawa. Now, Cozens is not the goal scorer that Norris is, but Cozens is still a very skilled second-line center who can put you up a whole bunch of points. I still think Cozens' ceiling is like a 70 to 80 point season, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But Cozens is now in Ottawa, and we'll have to wait and see how good of a player he can be with the Senators organization. When it comes to Dennis Gilbert, he's a solid third-pair defenseman. He's been that this year for Buffalo. Now, I think on Ottawa, he'll probably be like a 7th, 8th defenseman, more of a depth guy. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw Ottawa place him on waivers at some point over the next couple of weeks, because Ottawa still has a really good blue line, even if they got rid of Bernard Docker. But still, interesting pickup there for the Senators. He can be a serviceable third-pair guy on that blue line for the Senators, so interesting note there. And they also get the 2026 second-round pick of the Buffalo Sabres. So that's a little more draft capital. It's next year's draft. Who knows what Buffalo will be like next year? So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. They could flip this pick potentially even later today, or they could hold on to it and try and draft someone next year. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I do think in this deal, the Sabres probably do win it, because I do think Norris has a little bit more scoring upside than Cozens does. But if Cozens stays healthy, gels well with a guy like maybe a Claude Giroux or Drake Batherson, and continues to produce really well in Ottawa, maybe Ottawa wins this deal. I don't think it'd be too surprising, especially with them also having a second-round pick in this deal. So, interesting note there, but that's a monumental blockbuster between the Sabres and the Senators. Another trade we saw earlier today, as I was talking about, was between the Jets and the Penguins. So this deal is as follows. The Winnipeg Jets, hold on. So this deal is as follows. Luke Schenn was dealt by the Pittsburgh Penguins to the Winnipeg Jets in exchange for a 2026 second-round pick and a 2027 fourth-round pick. So a couple of really intriguing pickups here for the Pittsburgh Penguins to get another second-round pick plus a fourth-round pick. Now, the fourth-round pick is 2 years down the road, and the second-round pick is a year down the road, so who knows what the Winnipeg Jets will be next year and the year after. Very likely chance those will be later-round picks, but it could wind up being maybe middle of the pack a little bit more. We'll have to wait and see, but the Jets do wind up giving a couple of draft picks to Pittsburgh, which I think the Penguins are happy to do, and the Jets get Luke Schenn. There was a lot of talk we talked about yesterday about how the Jets thought they were close to acquiring Luke Schenn from Nashville before Predators trade him to Pittsburgh. I thought there was a very likely chance Luke Schenn would get flipped. He was 37th on my trade board after the trade to Pittsburgh. The others thought there was a very likely chance he was going to get flipped, and now he's in Winnipeg. So, interesting note there. I'm not too surprised about this. The Jets, I think, really do like Luke Schenn and value him. He's a right shot defenseman, could probably play on that second pair, maybe with a guy like Neil Pionk. That could be a really good pair, Neil Pionk and Luke Schenn. So, interesting note there. I'm not sure if this will be the only move the Jets make this year, or this day. There's a very likely chance. I've heard a couple of people say they could try and trade Brandon Tanev, so we're definitely going to have to wait and see what happens there. But keep your eye on the Jets. There's a possibility they could try and do some more. Also, keep your eye on the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, they're popping up second-round picks, picking them up like no tomorrow. So all in all, it could wind up being a really good pickup there for the Penguins. When it comes to another trade we saw, and that was with the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets have traded their 2027 second-round pick to the Seattle Kraken for the full cap hit of Brandon Tanev. Now, Tanev, as we talked about before, real sort of locker room presence, really great guy, sort of has really good vibes around the Seattle Kraken organization ever since they acquired him in the expansion draft. He had been a really good locker room fit there. Also a really skilled bottom six forward. He's not going to put you up a whole bunch of points, but can get some timely goals in like third or fourth line roles. And Winnipeg could probably play on like the fourth line. I don't think the Jets really want to break up the Niederreiter, Lowry, Appleton line. But if they could play him on like the fourth line with guys like maybe Rasmus Kupari or an Alex Iafallo, like I think that could be a really good pickup there for the Jets. Probably will only be a rental, but still, it's a really good pickup there as the Jets acquire Brandon Tanev. So just refreshing here, see if we've seen anything else. That seems like a no right now. No official confirmation on the Rantanen detail on what exactly is going to Carolina, although it sounds like Stankoven's a part of it. I'm hearing Brock Besser potentially be linked to Carolina. No trade has happened at this point in time, but there's a possibility that could wind up happening. We're just over an hour away from the actual trade deadline. I will be with you here until around 1:30. And then at that point, I'll be shutting it off. Maybe do a couple more videos later today. Probably going to do a couple of videos tomorrow regarding all that was happened here over the past couple of days. So definitely don't forget to stay tuned for those things. But we do have a lot of interesting pieces that are on play here. So as we just talked about, I'll just quickly go through it before I just do a couple of things on my phone. So first, yesterday, a couple of things we did not ever mentioned. Minnesota acquired Justin Brazeau, who was 24th on my trade bait list from the Minnesota Wild, from the Boston Bruins in exchange for Marek Kuznetsov, Jacob Lauko, and 2026 sixth-round pick, a deal in which I personally feel the Boston Bruins won. Then we saw a massive deal between the Avalanche and the Islanders that saw the Avalanche acquire Brock Nelson with 50% of his contract retained, and William Dufour from the New York Islanders in exchange for young prospect Callum Ritchie, Oliver Shillington, a 2026 conditional first-round pick that'll either be in this year's draft or next year's draft. They'll either be in the 2026 draft or the 2027 draft, and a third-round pick that'll be transferred to them if the Avalanche win the Cup. So that's an interesting deal. Personally, I do think that the Islanders won this one because of the massive haul they were able to get for Brock Nelson. Although the Avalanche do really get a solid second-line center here in Nelson. Then we saw the Islanders flip Shillington to the Ducks for future considerations. Not a bad move here from the Anaheim Ducks to acquire a depth defenseman. I think the Ducks do win this deal because they get the only piece of this deal, and I think Shillington in the Anaheim Ducks organization could work out actually quite well. On top of that, we saw Edmonton acquire Jake Wallman for a conditional 2026 top 12 protected first-round pick, and Carl Berglund, which I think is an absolutely brilliant piece of work there from Will Guerrier to get a first-round pick and a second-round pick, which they acquired in the offseason when they acquired Jake Wallman originally for Jake Wallman. It's a brilliant piece of work there from Sharks GM, and they get an interesting pickup here and a top 12 protected first-round pick in next year's draft. Then we saw the Washington Capitals acquire Anthony Beauvillier from the Penguins for a 2025 second-round pick, a deal in which I do think the Penguins win, given the fact a second-round pick for a bottom six forward is really good. Then we saw the LA Kings acquire Andrei Kuzmenko and a 2025 seventh-round pick, with Kuzmenko having 50% of his contract retained from the LA Kings. From the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for the LA Kings 2027 third-rounder. I do really think this is a really good move for the Philadelphia Flyers to get a third-round pick, although I do think that the Kings probably do win this one, getting Kuzmenko. Then we saw a blockbuster between Ottawa and Buffalo that saw Buffalo acquire Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker from Ottawa for Dylan Cousins, Dennis Gilbert, and a 2026 second-round pick. I do think that the Sabres getting Norris do win this deal, but if Cousins fits in really well and if the Sens use that second-round pick to good use, I think there's a very likely chance that the Senators could wind up being the winners of that deal. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Then we saw the Winnipeg Jets acquire Luke Schenn from the Penguins for a second and fourth-round pick, second in 2026, fourth in 2027. I do think that the Penguins win this deal because a second and a fourth-round pick for a second or third pair defenseman is beautiful work there from GM Kyle Dubas. And on top of that, I do think that Jets, although they do give up a second and fourth round pick, make out pretty well here by getting Luke Schenn. And then the Jets also acquired Brandon Tanev at his full cap hit from the Seattle Kraken in exchange for a 2027 second round pick. So I do think that at this point that the second round pick for bottom six forward is really good. So I do think that Seattle does win this deal. I know I'm picking a lot of sellers to win these sorts of deals, but it's a seller's market out there, and the amount of picks being moved for these players are outstanding. So interesting out there. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on these deals. Do you think Tanev Do you think Tanev going to Winnipeg? Do you think Schenn going to Winnipeg? Who do you think won those deals? Was it Winnipeg or was it Seattle or Pittsburgh? Do you think Pittsburgh won the Beauvillier deal? Do you think Norris won the Buffalo deal? Or Buffalo won the Norris deal? Do you think that Kuzmenko going to LA? Do you think the Kings won that deal? And what about all the deals we saw yesterday? What were your opinions on all the deals we've seen up to this point? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of that. Down in the comments, down in the chat, check it all out. I would love to hear your guys' opinion on all of this. Just give me a minute here to just get a couple of sips of water. So just looking at some other things that we could be seeing here. So it does sound like Stankoven is going to Dallas. So that could be really a pickup from Dallas to Carolina. So that could be a really good pickup there for the Hurricanes. Just let me check on a couple of things here. It does sound like Columbus is acquiring Luke Kunin from the San Jose Sharks. He's, I think, number 9 on my trade bait list, if I'm correct. I'll have to look at that in a minute, but it does sound like Luke Kunin, who was held out at yesterday's game for the San Jose Sharks due to trade-related reasons, is being dealt to Columbus, and I think that's a really good move there for the Jackets, who are in a playoff spot right now, want to reward their team. Going after a bottom 6 forward who won't cost too much is a really good move there for Columbus. So that's going to be an interesting pickup. We'll have to see what the return is for the Sharks. I think it's like at this point a 3rd round pick at least. So interesting note there. Let's see what else we can talk about here. Yeah, so Tanev is going to Winnipeg for a 2nd round pick. You know, a 2nd round pick for Tanev is not, I think, anything to scoff at. So I think this is a really good pickup there for the Jets. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But it's also a pretty good haul for the Kraken to get a 2nd round pick for a depth player who's in the final year of his deal. So a really good haul there for Seattle. So interesting out there. Just trying to look at some other things that could be happening here. It does sound like Scott Laughton and a couple of draft picks are going to Toronto for Grebyankin and a 1st round pick. That's sort of what it sounds like. No official word yet on what the conditions are or if that is the true deal. But it does sound like Scott Laughton is heading to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Laughton's been linked to Toronto for a while. Even a couple of years back, Laughton has been linked to Toronto. So that could be a really good pickup there for... So that should be a really good pickup there for the Leafs. They now have their solid 2nd, 3rd line center, and I think that could be a really good pickup there for Toronto. So interesting note there. We probably have a couple more things to talk about in the very near future. Definitely don't forget to stay tuned. Love to hear your guys' thoughts in the chat down below. Definitely, if you haven't already, leave a comment. What is your opinion on all the stuff that's happened over the past little while? And are you expecting anything? I'll probably go through each and every team, just discussing what moves I could potentially see later today. So definitely don't forget to stay tuned for that. Just give me a minute here. Let's see here. What else can we do? Okay, so now I'm going to go through each team, see what they've done so far up until this point, and sort of see what else we could touch on here. So we're going to go through Central Division, see what each and every team could wind up doing here. So we'll start with the Chicago Blackhawks. We know that they dealt Seth Jones last week. It was a really interesting move. They acquired Spencer Knight. I don't think they made any other moves after that, so that was the only move I think the Blackhawks made. But he's a really good pickup there for the Panthers. They get Knight. There's a lot of talk that they want to do similar style moves. Earlier today, I did hear some people saying that Ryan Donato was potentially going to be extended by Chicago instead of moved. Now, in a market that has these many draft picks being flipped around, I don't know why the Hawks wouldn't want to move him, but Donato's actually been a really solid guy, having a career season in Chicago. So if they signed to like a 2 to 3 year deal at around like $3 or $4 million, I wouldn't be overly upset with that, but I do think they should try and move him. He's number 2 on my trade bait list. On top of that, a couple of other guys that could wind up seeing moving after the Jones trade. I don't think Connor Murphy's going to get dealt, although I do wonder about Alec Martinez, given the fact he's in the final year of his deal. I don't think he's on my trade bait list, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Martinez get dealt. Patrick Maroon's another guy who I've heard could potentially get moved today. He's going to be a guy we have to watch out for. I don't think the Hawks will go out and add anyone, but I think the 2 guys to watch out for would be Maroon and Martinez, with potentially Kurashev also being on the market there for the Blackhawks. That's what I expect them to do. For the Avalanche, I expect them to be really relatively quiet. Wouldn't be surprised if they add like a bomb 6 forward or maybe like a depth defenseman, but I mean, a couple of days ago they acquired Ryan Lindgren. Last night they got Brock Nelson. Like, I don't think they need to do too much now. They have Casey Milstead as a 3rd line center. They could still try and move him to create some cap flexibility, but they made a lot of moves earlier in the year when they did the goaltending swaps, now having Blackwood and Wedgwood instead of Georgiev and Union. So I think the Avalanche are probably going to be pretty quiet over the next hour. But I wouldn't be surprised if they made like some sort of a bomb 6 depth add. So I'll have to wait and see on that. Going over to the Going over to Dallas Stars now, if they do wind up getting Mikko Rantanen, I think they're probably most likely going to get done. It sounds like Stankoven, maybe a couple of other things are in that sort of a trade package. So we'll have to wait and see on the exact trade package. But if Dallas is able to pull off this deal for Mikko Rantanen, I don't really see him doing much else. I think that takes up also most of their LTIR space anyways. I wouldn't be overly shocked if they try to add something on the blue line. Like, we know that blue line is not overly great, and it sounds like Heiskanen's going to be out until the start of the playoffs, or maybe even into the playoffs. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if they went out, try to acquire like maybe a third pair of defensemen. A guy like Yoki Haru might be an interesting option there. Shen's off the board now, so he can't be going. Maybe a guy like Martinez, who we just talked about. So I think Dallas might focus on the defensive aspect more, but I think with the addition of Rantanen, after Granlund a little while ago, with Andre still being in that, like, I think goaltending forward group, they're perfect. The only place I could see him potentially add before the trade deadline hits in an hour is maybe on the blue line, so we'll have to wait and see on that. When we go over to Minnesota Wild, it's starting to sound more and more like they're not going to do much more. We just heard them acquire Justin Brazeau yesterday. Last week, they acquired Gustav Nyquist. Nyquist is going to be a solid middle six addition. Brazeau, a solid fourth line addition. Hard-hitting type forward guy. But they don't have much cap space. Like, Kaprizov and Eric Sneck are on long-term injury reserve. If they were to stay there until the playoffs, they would have a whole bunch of cap space to potentially play around with. But it sounds like they'll be back at some point during the season, which makes it a really hard cap situation to wiggle around with, especially given the fact that they still have the Parise and Suter buyout. So I probably wouldn't expect much more for the Minnesota Wild. Maybe they try and add like a depth defenseman or a depth forward, someone who they could fit under their cap. So we're gonna have to wait and see on that. But keep your eye on Minnesota. I don't really think they'll do much here. When it comes to Nashville, we talked about them just a little while ago. They traded Shen and they traded Novak to Pittsburgh for Bunting and a fourth-round pick. We talked about them trading Nyquist. Earlier in the year, they traded Wedgwood for a Union. There's still a couple of pieces who could potentially be moved. Like, I keep hearing Ryan O'Reilly's name. He wants to stay in Nashville. It seems like O'Reilly does, but it still seems like there's a potentiality there could be a trade there earlier today. When it comes to defense, I don't really think there's any more. But they also saw him trade Alex Carrier earlier in the year, so I really don't think there's much that the Predators are going to do. I think they've already made most of their moves. O'Reilly's probably the biggest name that we could see before the trade deadline hits, so we have to wait and see on that. St. Louis and Utah are really interesting, especially with their placement in the standings right now. I think Utah's like 2 or 3 points back of a playoff spot. I think St. Louis is like 1 point back. I think they both played more games than the Canucks and the Flames have, so they're not overly good when it comes to the odds, but they're both still in really decent positions when it comes to potentially challenging for a playoff spot, given the fact Calgary and Vancouver haven't really looked overly good this year. So when it comes to St. Louis, we already saw them make an interesting move a little while ago, acquiring, hold on, who was it they acquired? Hold on here. I'm not exactly sure, but I think they made a move earlier. I know they acquired Cam Fowler earlier in the year. It seems that they're trying to do a couple of interesting things. They don't have a whole bunch of pending UFAs, so I wouldn't expect them to do much. Colin Parayko, who I thought could have been dealt, is now going to be injured for the next 6 weeks, so I don't really see them doing anything there. They moved Scott Perunovich. Yeah, I don't really see the Blues doing much. There was some talk about Brayden Schenn, maybe Jordan Binnington. I think with them being this close, they probably won't do that. I think if there was to be a Schenn move, it would have to be for a really high ask. So I would probably think St. Louis was rather done. Maybe they try and acquire like a depth UFA to try and just fill out a hole that they have on their system. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but definitely keep your eye on the St. Louis Blues. They're going to be an interesting team. Utah too. We just saw Utah sign Vejmelka, sign Mata, sign Kerfoot, sign Cole, all of whom were pending UFAs. So I wouldn't be overly shocked if they tried to add someone. We talked about this before. Matias Maccelli is 26 on my trade bait list right now. He could wind up being dealt. I think it's a little bit less likely unless they have a trade that really does help. If they could acquire a top 9 forward, I think Utah might try and make some sort of a move, even if it was to maybe move off like a second round pick or a Maccelli or maybe even one of their decent prospects. I think Utah might be willing to do that, given the fact that Ryan Smith really wants to try and make the playoffs in year 1. So it'll be interesting to see, but I could see Utah try and make some sort of an interesting move. We'll have to keep our eye on that. When it comes to Winnipeg, they just acquired Brandon Tanev. They just acquired Luke Schenn. I'm not sure how much more cap space they have to work with, especially given the fact they took the entire cap hit of both Schenn and Tanev on. So I'm not sure if they'll do any more. They could try and still look for a second line center, although I'm not sure if they will try and do that at this point in time. So we'll have to wait and see on that. So when it comes to them, look for Maroon and Martinez to potentially be on the block for Chicago. Look for Colorado to maybe try and add some depth pieces. Look for Dallas to maybe try and add a depth defender. Look for Minnesota to maybe try and add like a very cheap option somewhere, either on the forward group or the defensive end. Look for Nashville maybe to try and move O'Reilly. Look for St. Louis to potentially move Brayden Schenn, but most likely try and add maybe a small low-end piece. Look for Utah to maybe try and add a small low-end piece as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to go for a top 9 forward with Term. And for Winnipeg, if they can swing it, maybe they try and go after a second-line center, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if they were basically done for the day. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but that's my opinion on the Central Division as it sits right now. And we'll have to wait for a little bit to see all the other things that happen. Hold on a minute, just going to check a couple of things here. Let's see what else is happening here. Okay. Chris Johnson on, I think, TSN is reporting that Victor Olofsson is not on the ice. So he might be a guy who gets dealt. I think he just signed a 1-year deal in the offseason, so maybe Vegas is trying to clear up a little bit of cap space to go after someone. We'll have to wait and see on that. But Olofsson, Vegas, keep your eye on that. We're about 50 minutes away from the deadline. So less than an hour. It seems like Boston and Colorado are working on their trade. We just talked about Milstead. He's on my trade bait list in, I think, the mid-30s. It sounds like he's getting dealt to Boston. Interesting out there. It sounds like Charlie Coyle is going to Colorado as part of this deal. No official word on what else could be here. Not sure if it's just a 1-for-1 deal, but it does sound like Coyle and Milstead are getting swapped. That could be a really interesting pickup there for the Bruins. Get a solid young center. Coyle was mentioned a little bit in trade rumors too, but I wasn't expecting him to get dealt. So this could be a really good pickup there for the Avalanche, who are heavily going for it right now. So that could be really interesting there. And for Middlestat, going to Boston, I mean, he was in Buffalo, so it's not much of a change from last year. And on top of that, the Bruins could use a solid second-line center who's a little bit on the younger side. So all in all, I think that could be a really good pickup there for the Boston Bruins to get a guy like him. So interesting note there. Like I said, stay with us. We're going to be here, hopefully, for the next little while. I'm planning on ending the stream around 1:30-ish. So, God willing, if it doesn't disconnect and anything, the stream will end around 1:30. So we'll have to wait and see on that. So yeah, it does sound like Milstead is going to Boston. That's going to be a really good addition there for the Bruins to get a solid young second-line center. So we have seen a lot of our guys on our trade bait list be taken off the trade bait list. So 1 is Brayden Schenn. He's still on the list right now. 2 is Ryan Donato. It's starting to sound like he probably won't get moved, but he's still on the list right now. 3 is Brock Besser. 4 is Mikko Rantanen. All indications are pointing that he will go to Dallas, although the deal hasn't been officialized yet. 5 is Trevor Zegras. He's still on the block. 6 is Scott Laughton. It sounds like he's heading to Toronto, although, like I said, haven't been officialized with the deal yet. 7, Nelson, like we'd already talked about. He's gone to Colorado. 8 is McCann. 8 is McCann. Not sure if he'll get dealt today or not, but he's on 8. 9th is Luke Kunin, so he could be an interesting pickup there for this team. I think we already said that he went to Columbus, so that could be an interesting pickup there. We already said that Dylan Cousins is in Ottawa now. Brad Marchand, he's a name we have to watch out for. Brendan Tanev's in Seattle. Radcard Raquel, he's a name we have to watch out for. Chris Kreider's name we have to watch out for too. So is Noah Dobson. On top of that, Morgan Geekie in Boston. Mario Ferraro in San Jose is another name we have to watch out for. David Savard, Montreal. Ivan Provorov in Columbus, though it sounds like he's most likely not going to get moved. And Alex Tuch. So interesting note there. We'll have to keep our eye on those guys. Just going to refresh this quickly, see if any of those deals have officially been made. Let's see. Hold on a minute here. No, it doesn't sound like there's been any updates on these deals. No. Okay. Still no official words yet on those deals, but it does sound like we do have a couple in the queue, including Lawton going to Toronto, including Middlestead going to Boston, including Rantanen going to Dallas, Kunin going to Columbus, and maybe a couple of other pieces too. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. It sounds like the Blackhawks and Red Wings are making a trade. Frank Seravalli is saying the Hawks are trading Peter Mrazek and Craig Smith to Detroit for Joe Veleno. So this is going to be interesting there. So if that is the true deal, and that's the only pieces, I think this is a really good pickup there for the Hawks. Veleno has sort of been boxed out of the top 9 in Detroit. Really been downgraded to like that fourth line center role. Hasn't been able to really work his way out of that. So if he can find a little bit more top 9 opportunities in Chicago, that could be a really good pickup there for the Hawks. When it comes to the Red Wings, they get a little more bomb 6 edition in Craig Smith, who really knows how to play well, and something they really probably desperately needed, they get a goaltender. Now we know that Talbot and Lyon have been their tandem this year. Haven't been overly fantastic. They've been all right, but it hasn't been great. But I think this is going to be a really good pickup there for the Red Wings. They'll probably bump down Talbot to like the backup status. Mrazek has experience playing in Detroit too, so interesting note there, but that sounds like the Hawks and Red Wings, 2 original 6 teams, are picking up on a deal. Interesting note there. It sounds like the Mikko Rantanen extension, which was pivotal for that Rantanen trade, will be an 8-year deal at around $12 million. So it does sound like the 8 years, around $12 million is what it's going to take for Rantanen to stay in Dallas. So interesting note there. It's going to be interesting to see if we see any more moves. Once again, leave a chat down below. Would love to hear your thoughts on all of the moves that we've heard so far and we've seen. So definitely don't forget to stay tuned for all the stuff that's going to happen. Probably going to have a couple more videos coming out later today maybe, or tomorrow, and definitely over on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. So definitely stay tuned for that. According to Frank Seravalli, Trade Talk Show is picking up around Brock Besser. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. I'm just going to go over another here, bit of rambling here, just talking about what the Pacific Division teams might be able to do. So we just talked about the Central, and after that, Chicago just dealt Mrazek and Smith. So we'll touch on the Pacific Division here. Anaheim, probably not going to do anything. Wouldn't expect them to. They already moved Brian Dumoulin. They made a couple of deals earlier, acquiring a guy like Jacob Trouba. So they made a couple of interesting moves. I wouldn't expect them to do much here. Like, I mean, offensively, they're a pretty solid team. Defensively, I wouldn't be overly surprised after acquiring Shillington too if they maybe tried to add like a depth defenseman or a depth forward just to give them a little more depth for this team. And I wouldn't be overly surprised if we saw Trevor Zegras or John Gibson get dealt, but it's seeming more and more unlikely that those two will get dealt. So Zegras and Gibson are 2 guys I'm looking at Anaheim, and maybe they add like a depth player, but that's what I'm looking at when it comes to Anaheim. When it comes to Calgary, probably going to be very quiet here. We've heard about Miromanov and Joel Hanley's names, potential trade chips for the Flames, but besides that, probably not going to do very much here. There's been some talk about them trying to add Brandon Carlo or Mario Ferraro. That's a possibility, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if they tried to do that, trying to bolster their defense, which I think could definitely use some bolstering. But besides that, I really don't think they're going to do much. They already acquired Farabee earlier in the year. They have a really good goaltending tandem. They have a decent enough forward group and a pretty weak blue line besides Rieger and Anderson. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if they tried to add on the blue line or move off Miromanov or Hanley. But besides that, I really don't see the Flames doing much. Edmonton, they've already made their moves. They acquired Jake Wallman. They, I think, added a depth forward earlier in the year. So they made interesting moves. So they've made some interesting moves, but I really don't see Edmonton Oilers doing much here. They could try and make a couple of other interesting moves. There's been some talk about trying to get a goaltender, but that seems more of like an off-season move. I think the Oilers are probably going to be pretty much done unless they try and add some depth somewhere. When it comes to Los Angeles, they just acquired Andrew Kuzmenko. We talked about this. There's been a lot of talk about them trying to go all in this year. Their first-round pick could potentially be on the table. So I'm not exactly sure if they'll make some sort of a move or not. We'll have to wait and see. I could see them try and add like a forward, maybe a top 9 forward, even after adding Kuzmenko to try and bolster that forward group. With Rantanen now gone, I'm not sure who they target. Maybe Brock Besser. That's a possibility. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there, but definitely keep your eye on the Kings. I wouldn't be overly surprised if they target a top 9 forward. When it comes to San Jose, They've already moved off Lukanen. They moved off Vitek Vanacek. They moved off Nico Sturm. Earlier in the year, they moved off Mikael Granlund, Cody Ceci. They also moved off Jake Wallman. So they've made a whole bunch of really interesting trades. I think they're very likely, most likely, done now. I don't think they're going to move Georgiev because I don't think very many teams want him. And on the defensive end, I could see him potentially trade Mario Ferraro. That's the only guy who I really think is a very likely chance of being dealt. Besides that, I really don't see anyone else being dealt, and I don't think they're at the point where they're going to add pieces. So I think that maybe just watch out for Mario Ferraro when it comes to San Jose. When it comes to Seattle, we've seen them make a whole bunch of really intriguing moves. They moved Oliver Bjorkstrand, they moved Yanni Gord. Earlier today, they've moved Brendan Tanev. So it'll be interesting to see. Jamie Alexiak's name has been out there. I'm not sure if he'll get dealt or not. On top of that, Jared McCann's name was out there. I think that'd be a very unlikely move, even though he is in the top 20 of my trade bait list. But I do really think that the Kraken are probably going to be done here unless they figure out a way to make a McCann or an Alexiak move. So keep your eye on those two guys, but besides that, really don't see the Kraken doing much. When it comes to the Canucks, they could do a lot of things here. There's been a lot of talk with them trying to add a top 6 scorer. As we just heard, Bester's name is potentially picking up steam. There's been some talk about Pius Suter being moved. So keep your eye on Bester and Suter's potential trade chips for the Canucks. Keep your eye on a guy like... keep your eye on a potential adding of a top 6 forward in Vancouver. Wouldn't be surprised if they tried to do that. Besides that, I really don't think they'll do much. They already moved off Carson Soucy yesterday, so acquired Marcus Peterson, moved JT Miller early in the year. So I really think they're probably going to be relatively done unless they are able to acquire a forward or move Besser or Studer. So we'll have to wait and see on that. When it comes to Vegas, they could be doing interesting things. There's been some talk recently, like we just talked about, that Olsen could be moved. Not very much things I don't think else will happen for Vegas. They already acquired Riley Smith. Maybe they try and add something on the blue line to sort of replace the production of Shea Theodore if he is going to be out for the rest of the year. Maybe they try and add like another top 9 forward. There's been a lot of talk about Marchand being a perfect fit in Vegas. So we'll have to wait and see on that. So I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas added a forward, if Vancouver added a forward, if Los Angeles added a forward, if the Kings moved off Bethler or Suter, if the Kraken moved off McCann or Alexiak, if the Sharks moved off Ferraro, if the Ducks moved off Gibson or Zegras, if the Flames maybe moved off Miramano over Hanley or added a blue liner, if the Oilers maybe added depth guys. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But keep your eye on all these teams, as there's a very likely chance that we could see some interesting things. So we'll have to wait and see, but those are the interesting updates when it comes to some of these interesting videos and trades that we could be seeing. Let's just double check here, see if there's anything that's happening. Let's see. Okay, so there has officially been a trade involving Chicago and Detroit. So yes, the official deal is as follows. Chicago has acquired Joseph Veleno from Detroit for Peter Mrazek and Craig Smith. So this is going to be a really big boost there for the Red Wings goaltending-wise. Craig Smith is a decent bomb 6'4", fits a little bit more on the fourth line than Joe Veleno does. So that could be really a pickup there for the Red Wings for their playoff run. Mrazek has this year and next year at $4.25 million. So that's a pretty high cap hit. But with them moving off Veleno, it sort of works itself out to only about a $3 million ad. So interesting note there. But I think Mrazek's going to be a big upgrade on Talbot and on Lyon. I think Talbot's probably the second stringer now. Lyon's the third stringer. Mrazek will now be a new starter. As a Senators fan, really don't want to see Detroit get better, but I do think they get a lot better in goal here with Mrazek, even if it's not an overly huge improvement. When it comes to Chicago, they get Veleno, young player. He's only 25 years old. He's in the first year of a 2-year deal. Could be a really good pickup there for the Hawks long term. So interesting note there, but the Hawks have acquired Veleno. The Red Wings have acquired Mrazek and Smith. So interesting note there. We're about 35 minutes away from the trade deadline. So don't forget to stay tuned for that. And we're going to be doing a couple more things over the next little while. Once again, don't forget to chat down the chat below. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. Love to hear your guys' opinion on all of this. Sorry for the buffering. It's the bad Wi-Fi I have in my area, but still, if you can, leave a chat, leave a comment. Love to hear your guys' opinion on all that's happened so far and the trade deadline. We're over an hour into the stream. We got about just over an hour left to go in the stream, so we'll keep in touch on what happens here. So far, not seeing anything more besides the Veleno deal. I'll just go on my phone, check if there's some interesting things going on here. Hold on. So it sounds like the Devils are acquiring Cody Glass. They've been looking for a center. That's not a really improvement for the Devils, but with Jack Hughes now injured, I guess any sort of improvement is really good. Glass was on my trade bait list, and on top of that, he's one of those 2017 first-round picks that seem to be moving teams so far this year, so interesting note there. Let's see what other things could potentially be happening here. So Mrazek deal is confirmed. Dale Panoro wonders if the Carolina Hurricanes could potentially go after Brad Marchand. That could be an interesting one. Marchand is a potential trade candidate here, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Some of the people are now saying that Dallas might be the favorite out of the Western Conference, so we'll have to wait and see on that. I think Cozen is going to be a really good pickup there for Ottawa. So interesting note there. It sounds like the Dallas Stars will get Rantanen at an AAV of around $12 million. For the fact that that's similar to what the Avalanche were offering and less than what the Hurricanes were offering is interesting. Now, Dallas is a no-tax state, so it's a lot easier to be paid a little bit lower, but still, interesting note there that does sound like the Stars are getting Rantanen for about $12 million, which is not overly bad. So that's when we see what happens there. When it comes to Toronto, they acquired Scott Lund. Like, that's going to be a really solid Middlesex ad for the Leafs. Versatile guy, play center, play wing. Really solid pickup there for the Leafs. So some interesting things here, but nothing really else to talk about right now. So got more interesting things to talk about as soon as some more of these deals officially finalize. But for the time being, nothing really interesting at this point in time. So interesting note there. So we've got a couple of interesting things. So we're going to go over here to the Atlantic Division and see what Atlantic Division teams could wind up doing over the next half an hour before the trade deadline. So when it comes to the Atlantic Division, we got Boston first. They've been making a slew of moves. They've moved off of Trent Frederic, who moved into Edmonton. That was the other Oiler player that was acquired. So they moved off Trent Frederic, who was a solid bomb 6 forward. Moved off Justin Brazeau. Got a couple of interesting pieces from Minnesota, but they do move off of him. It sounds like they're dealing Coyle to Colorado for Middlestat, so that could be a really good pickup there. When it comes to potential other moves they could do, the three guys I'm looking at are Brendan Carlo, Brad Marchand, and Morgan Geekie. Geekie's in the final year of his deal. He's an RFA, could be dealt for a pretty penny. Marchand, if he was to be dealt, could be dealt for a massive return. And when it comes to Carlo, he's got term on his contract. I wouldn't be overly surprised if he stayed, but there has been some talk about him potentially being moved. So look for the Bruins to potentially deal Marchand, potentially deal Carlo, and potentially deal Geekie. When it comes to Buffalo, it seems that they've made their big trade, the Norris for Cozens one. I don't think they're going to do much more. They've already extended Jason Zucker. They've extended Jordan Greenway. I don't think they're going to do much more here. They could try and move Henry Jokiharju. That's a possibility. But besides that, unless they're going to do like some sort of a big move when it comes to Bowen Byram, when it comes to JJ Peterka, or when it comes to Alex Tuck, I really don't see Buffalo doing much. So look for Henry Jokiharju. I think he's a very likely trade candidate right now for Buffalo. But also keep your eye on maybe Alex Tuck, JJ Peterka, and Bowen Byram as potential trade candidates for Buffalo. When it comes to the Detroit Red Wings, we just saw them make a trade, acquiring Mrazek and Craig Smith for Joe Veleno, help facilitate the Oliver Bjorkstrand deal. So I could see them try to make some more moves. They could try and flip some of their bad contracts like Vladimir Tarasenko or Justin Hull. I wouldn't be overly surprised if they try to add some top 6 or top 9 help on this day in the next half an hour if it was to be able to present itself. The Red Wings will have cap space to work with, so we'll have to see what happens there, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if we saw the Red Wings maybe deal Tarasenko or Hull and try and acquire a top 9 forward. When it comes to Florida, very likely chance I think they're most likely done. They acquired a 4th line center in Sturm. They got Seth Jones, who's going to fit quite well into that top 4 on the defensive end. They also acquired Vitek Vanecek to be the new backup after dealing Spencer Knight. So they're a new look team here, but I don't think they're going to do much more here. I could see maybe try and add like a bomb 6 player, someone who can play on the third or fourth line. Besides that, really don't see him doing very much. So interesting note there. When it comes to Montreal, when it comes to Montreal, I'm not exactly sure what they'll do. There's been a lot of talk about David Savard, Joel Armia potentially being moved. I don't know if they will or not. The Canadiens are really close to a playoff spot, so that might have deterred them from moving away from their UFAs. We know they extended Evans already, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But keep your eye on Armia and Savard as potential trade candidates. When it comes to Ottawa, probably going to be done. They didn't really have a whole bunch of cast to work with. Made the Cousins for Norris deal, unless they're willing to move someone else to try and acquire maybe like a depth defenseman or a bomb 6 forward. I really don't think that the Senators are going to do much more here today. So especially with their cap problems right now, so expect the Senators to probably not do very much. Much to the chagrin of myself, although I do think the Cousins ad is pretty good. When it comes to Tampa, probably also a team who's pretty done. They made one really big deal acquiring Bjorkstrand and Gord, which really helped that forward group get more deep. I do wonder if they try and maybe add one more depth forward to try and really bolster that forward group. But besides that, I really don't see the Bolts doing much. We hear that the Maple Leafs are acquiring Scott Laughton, so it sounds like that's going to happen. That's going to be a really big boost to their bottom 6. It sounds like Philly's also retaining some money on that, so we'll have to wait and see on that. But I do think that could be an interesting pickup there for the Toronto Maple Leafs to acquire Scott Laughton. I'm not sure if they'll do much more. Like defensively, I think they're pretty sound. Goaltending wise, they're pretty sound. Wouldn't be surprised if they tried to add maybe one more top 9 forward if they could fit it in cap wise. But besides that, I really don't see the Toronto Maple Leafs doing anything. So Leafs, maybe look for them to try and add one more top 9 forward. Bolts, maybe try and add a depth forward. Ottawa, maybe try and add like a depth forward or depth defenseman. Montreal, see if they can maybe try and move Savard or Armia. Florida, maybe try and add depth forward of some sorts. Detroit, maybe try and add a top 9 forward. Buffalo, maybe try and move Jokiharju or Tuck Paterka or Byram. And Boston, see if they can try and move Carlo Marchand or Geeky. So that's my opinion on the Atlantic, with just under half an hour left until the trade deadline. So interesting out there. My thoughts on the Soucy deal are, it's an interesting pickup there. A third-round pick, a high one, especially given the fact that it's a Shark third-round pick. For Carson Soucy, I think is a pretty good pickup there for Vancouver. And although I do think that that's going to leave a little bit of a hole in the blue line, I do think that getting a third-round pick for a guy who sort of fell out of favor is pretty good. And I think that the Rangers got a pretty decent defender here in Carson Soucy. So that's my opinion on the Soucy deal. Still no official trades here. I do want to go and see if there's anything else that's being mentioned. Let's see. So it seems like, according to Frank Saravalli, the full deal for the Avalanche and the Bruins when it comes to Coyle and Middlestead is Charlie Coyle and the Bruins' 26th fifth-round pick are being dealt to Colorado for Will Zellers, Casey Middlestead, and a conditional 2025 second-round pick. So interesting out there. It seems like Zellers was the third-round pick in the 2024 draft. So I'll have to wait and see on that. But it does sound like Coyle Middlestead swap's going to happen. Don't really see anything else that's happening at this point. Jeff Patterson about half an hour ago said that Brock Boeser left the ice along with all the teammates though, so that's not anything surprising. What happened with waivers? Hold on. Interesting note. They're like, Dallas may have the best forward group in the NHL. They have Johnston, Hintz, and Granlund, Bork, Duchesne, and Marchment, Ben Johnston to Donov, adding Rantanen, say Sagan gets healthy in the playoffs. That is going to be a lethal top 9. Dallas might have to be my new favorites for the Western Conference. Like, they are looking lethal, and they just made a huge addition. So, interesting note there. Middleton's now in Boston, as we just talked about. Sounds like Granlund's going to sign an extension and go to Dallas. Not exactly sure what else is going to happen. So interesting out there. So that sounds like Luke Cunning's going to Columbus. So that will be a solid add to their bottom 6. Interesting note there. Jets acquire Brandon Tanev, Saul Bomsix ad for the Jets, who can play on probably the fourth line and do really good there. So interesting note there, but that's my opinion on the Atlantic. That's all of my stuff right now. Left your guys' thoughts. Leave a chat down in the chat below. Comment down in the comment section below. What were some of the more surprising things you saw so far? Was it Nelson getting dealt to Colorado last night? Was it Wallman getting dealt to Edmonton? Was it one of the earlier ones from today? Was it the Norris Cousins swap? Was it Kuzmenko going to LA? Was it Lawton going to Toronto? Was it the Coyle Milstead swap? Was it Rantanen potentially going to Colorado? Definitely. Love your guys' thoughts on all of this down in the comment section below. Keep on liking this video. Keep on commenting. Keep on leaving a chat. Love your guys' opinion on all of this. We're less than 25 minutes away from the trade deadline, so sounds like things are picking up. So far today we've had, officially today, not last night, but today we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 official trades with guys like Rantanen, Lawton, Milstead, and Kunin potentially being in the works here too. So interesting note there. We're going to be here with you for just over 2 more hours. For just over another hour, we're going to be with you here, God willing that my stream doesn't cut out, and we'll see what happens. It very likely could wind up happening that we see a lot of trades. Like last year, my jaw dropped to the floor when Thomas Hertl was dealt to Vegas. Will we see another one of those deals late, just before the trade deadline happens? We'll have to wait and see. So it's an interesting couple of things here, just to recap from what we saw from earlier today. So wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 deals. So the Penguins have moved Anthony Beauvillier to the Washington Capitals for a 2025 second-round pick. The Penguins have also flipped Luke Schenn to the Winnipeg Jets for a 2026 second and 2027 fourth-round pick. The Jets have also acquired Brandon Tanev from Seattle for a 2025, I think, or 2027 second-round pick. The Ottawa Senators and Buffalo Sabres have made a big swap as Ottawa's acquired Dylan Cousins, Dylan Gilbert, and a 2026 second-round pick for Jacob Bernard-Docker and Josh Norris. So that's a big trade there that happened. LA has acquired Kuzmenko with 50% of his contract retained, and a 2027 seventh-round pick and a 2025 seventh-round pick from Philadelphia in exchange for a 2027 third-round pick. Interesting trade there. We also saw Chicago acquired Joe Veleno from Detroit for Peter Mrazek and a Craig Smith. So interesting note there. Those are all the official deals. We're still waiting on the official announcements on things like we're still waiting on the official announcements for the Lawton deal, we're still waiting on official announcement for a Lawton deal, Rantanen deal, Kunin deal, Milstead deal, although it sounds like some things are starting to get worked towards. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on those things. We still have a couple of guys in our top 20 who have not been moved yet. I'll get to that in a minute. Apparently, according to Elliot Friedman, the Stars and Wyatt Johnston have come to terms on a contract extension. Johnston's getting a 5-year extension with an AV of $8.4 million. So it seems like Johnston's staying around for at least the next handful of seasons for Dallas. Beautiful piece of work there from Stars GM Jim Nill. If the Stars team goes to Cup final, Jim Nill's making a whole bunch of really great moves there so far this year. It sounds like recently traded New York Rangers player Urho Vakanainen, who arrived there in the Jacob Trouba deal, I think late last year, in like December in 2024, has signed a 2-year extension with an AV of $1.55 million to remain in the New York Rangers organization. So Vanakainen's finally found himself a home. I'm really happy for him. He was a former 2017 first-round pick. I've been bouncing around from Boston to Anaheim, so hopefully if he can stay healthy, he can be a solid third-pair defenseman there for the the New York Rangers. Doesn't sound like anything else is happening at the moment. Not exactly sure what's happened here. So let's just go over to our top 20 here and see who's been dealt and who hasn't. So let's go over to our top 20. So in our top 20, we currently have Brayden Schenn, 1, hasn't been dealt yet. Ryan Donato, 2, hasn't been dealt yet. Brock Boeser, 3, hasn't been dealt yet. Mikko Rantanen, 4, has apparently been dealt to the Dallas Stars, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Trevor Zegras, 5, hasn't been dealt yet. Scott Laughton, 6, has apparently been dealt to Toronto. Brock Nelson's in Colorado. Jared McCann has officially been dealt has not been dealt yet. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. Luke Cunnin has been dealt to Columbus apparently, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And Dylan Cousins is in Ottawa. So Cousins and Nelson are now off the board. It's sounding like Luke Cunnin, Scott Laughton, and Mikko Rantanen will also be off the board. And we'll have to wait and see if there's any more players who wind up getting dealt in the top 10. When it comes to the other side, Marchand has not been dealt yet. Tanev is in Winnipeg. Raquel's not been dealt yet. Kreider's not been dealt yet. And Dobson has not been dealt yet. So those guys have all yet not been dealt. Then Morgan Geekie has not been dealt yet. Mario Ferraro has not been dealt yet. David Savard has not been dealt yet. Provorov and Tuch have not been dealt yet. So Tanev, who was 12th on my trade bait board. Kunin, who was 10. Apparently Cousins, who was 10. Kunin, who was apparently 9. Nelson, who was 7. Laughton, who was apparently 6, and Mikko Rantanen, who was apparently 4, have all been traded apparently. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But interesting note there, when it comes to potentially seeing some more things happening, we're 20 minutes away from the trade deadline, and then we'll stay for about half an hour afterwards to see what sort of big deals could wind up happening. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Let's see if any more. Okay, so we do have the Milstead deal. It's official now. So let's go take a look at that. So the official deal is the Colorado Avalanche have acquired Charlie Coyle and the Boston Bruins 2026 fifth round pick from the Boston Bruins in exchange for Casey Middlestead, 2025 second rounder in Carolina, and William Zellers. Zellers was a third round pick in the 2024 draft. So Zellers, I think, eventually could be a solid middle six center, maybe even winger there for the Bruins. So that's a really good pickup there for the Bruins to get some more draft capital for this year's draft and the 2025 second round pick. And they get Casey Middlestead. Middlestead's in the first year of a 3-year deal with a view of $5.75 million for the second straight year he's dealt to the trade deadline. He's only 26 years old, so I gotta think he's gonna be a really solid second line center add for the Boston Bruins behind maybe Pavel Zacha. So interesting note there. For the Avalanche, they get Charlie Coyle. Coyle has this year and next year left at a $5.25 million cap hit, so they do get 1 year free because Middlestead has 2 years left on his deal. Coyle has 1, so they do get 1 year of cap relief, and they also get $500,000 in cap space as well because Middlestead has $500,000 more than Coyle. And I think Coyle's really well suited to be the team's third line center. You have a top 3 center group now in Colorado of Nathan MacKinnon, you have Brock Nelson, and you have Charlie Coyle. That center group is lethal to ginormous proportions. So a really good pickup there for the Avalanche. And we also saw the Bruins 2026 fifth round pick go to Colorado. It's way lower than a second round pick, but they at least get some draft capital in return. So interesting note there. But the Bruins get a second round pick, Middlestead, and Zellers from Colorado for Charlie Coyle on a fifth round pick. That's an interesting move. And Middlestead, who I think was in my late 30s, like he was either 36 or 35 on my trade board, is now gone. So interesting note there. Like we said, under 20 minutes left to go until the trade deadline. And then people have to put that on their phones, and we'll see what sort of trades leak through at the last minute. Very likely chance we'll see a couple of interesting ones. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Let's go over to see what else is happening right now. Give me a minute here. Let's see. Hold on a minute. Just looking. Yeah, so Johnston has signed a 5-year extension, $8.4 million. For what Johnston is providing, that's a steal of a deal. I'm sure they would probably want to go 8 years, but 5 years is still pretty good for Johnston, so really good stuff there for Dallas. So yeah, Johnston staying in Dallas, not too surprising there. He signs an extension. Absolutely brilliant piece of work there from Jim Neal. So Dallas making multiple moves today, extending their young center and potentially acquiring Mikko Rantanen. So interesting note there. It still sounds like we don't know exactly what happens. It sounds like Rantanen is going to be dealt for like a set 2 firsts and Stankoven, but I haven't got an official word on that. So interesting note there. It sounded like there's a couple other interesting things as we talked about. Sabres signed Jason Zucker earlier today to a 2-year deal. I think it was with like a $4.375 million AAV. For a team that is needing to make some more movements. I'm not sure why they keep on signing Zucker and Greenway, but interesting note there. So some interesting things that happened from our past little while. So we got some more interesting things to talk about. We're going to actually go over here to the Metro Division, with us being about 17 minutes away from the trade deadline, because the Metro Division is the only division I haven't gone through yet. So we'll look at the Metro Division and see what they could do in the final few minutes leading up to the trade deadline. So we'll start with the Carolina Hurricanes, because they're alphabetically the first team. So they just moved Mikko Rantanen, so it sounds like they're acquiring Logan Stankoven. Given where they're on the standings and they have a solid defense, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to either upgrade on the goaltending side and try and get an upgrade on Anderson and Kochetkov, or if they tried to upgrade up in the middle six, because I think that's the big piece as to where they have a hole now with Rantanen gone. So with Rantanen and Nate just now gone, I really do think that team needs another middle six forward, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Hurricanes tried to make some sort of move to add a middle six forward. When it comes to Columbus, it sounds like are adding Luke Kunin. Besides that, I really don't see much doing. Like, there was a lot of talk earlier in the year about them moving Ivan Provorov, but it sounds like GM Don Waddell doesn't really want to move him. So when it comes to that, we also got a couple of other things to talk about with the Jackets. Like, I really don't see them doing much. They have a pretty solid defense. Merzlikins is doing pretty good this year. Their offense is scoring really well. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe add one or two veteran presences besides Kunin, maybe like a bomb six forward or a third pair defenseman. Wouldn't be overly shocked if the Jackets did something like that, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. When it comes to the Devils, we talked about them acquiring Cody Glass. That's another deal that hasn't officially gone through, but it sounds like that's going to happen. They really need to do more. Jack Hughes is done for the season. Hamilton's got a couple of injuries that's going to keep him out week to week. They've already, it sounds like, acquired Brian Dumoulin. We talked about this a little while ago. Markstrom's now back, so if there was to be an addition, I think it would be another top 9 forward. Wouldn't be surprised if they tried to go for another center. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Jersey trying to add a top 9 forward. For the Islanders, it sounds like they've really decided to make Kyle Palmieri stay in New York, so it doesn't sound like he's going to get moved. So it sounds like Palmieri will wind up keeping and remaining in New York beyond this year. It sounds like they're trying to work together on a contract extension. Even if they don't have that extension in place, it sounds like Palmieri will stay in New York, so interesting note there. When it comes to Nelson, they just moved him. We talked about that. I don't really see him moving Noah Dobson, even though he's in the top 20 of my trade bait list, unless they got an offer that blows them out of the water. I don't really think there's many other guys that the Islanders could move. Maybe Pajot, so maybe keep your eye on Palmieri and Pajot as potential trade options in the last 14 minutes here before our trade deadline. When it comes to the New York Rangers, they made a whole bunch of moves in season. They moved Jacob Trouba. They acquired JT Miller. They made some other interesting moves, acquiring Will Borgen. I think they made another interesting add. Other than the subtractions, they moved Ryan Lindgren, moved Riley Smith. So they made some interesting moves, moving some pending UFAs, adding some decent players who could help them long term. So I'm not exactly sure if the Rangers will do much more. They've already moved basically all their pending UFAs. Keandre Miller, Chris Kreider are the only two guys who I could potentially see getting moved. Although I think with the Rangers still hovering on a playoff mark, they may try and keep those two guys. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but it sounds like the Rangers probably will not do much more today. When it comes to the Flyers, it sounds like they're moving Scott Laughton. It sounds like that deal is probably going to get announced in the very near future. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if they potentially maybe didn't do much more. They already moved Laughton. They moved Kuzmenko and Farabee. They moved Kuzmenko earlier today. They moved Farabee and Frost earlier in the year, so they've done some decent stellar moves, which I don't think is too bad for a Flyers team that needs to be in the stellar mindset. The one guy I could see potentially getting moved is Rasmus Ristolainen. He's been in the room a little bit. Sounds like they have a really high ask for Ristolainen, so because of that, I don't think he'll get moved, but we'll have to keep our eye on Ristolainen. When it comes to Pittsburgh, they've been making move after move after move. Moved Luke Schenn after acquiring him, after moving Michael Bunting. They've acquired Thomas Novak. They've moved off of Anthony Beauvillier. They've moved off a couple of other pieces over the past couple of days. So they're going to be an interesting name. Marcus Peterson earlier in the year. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if they maybe tried to do one more move. I like maybe a depth guy like a Noel Acciari, Matt Grzelcyk, one of those two guys could be moved. Maybe a goaltender like an Alex Nedeljkovic could also be moved. I wouldn't be overly surprised. Rickard Rakell, who's in my top 20, I could see one of getting moved, but I wouldn't be always surprised if he stayed, so we'll have to wait and see on that. But keep your eye on the Penguins as they continue to try and be sellers at this year's trade deadline. And for the Capitals, probably won't do much more. They acquired Anthony Beauvillier. They didn't want to do too much to tinker with this team. Wouldn't be surprised if they add like a depth defenseman or a depth forward. But I think the addition of Beauvillier is probably going to be one of the only things that they end up doing today. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But it does sound like those are sort of the only moves I could see for the Metro. So for Carolina, keep your eye on our top 9 forward. For Columbus, maybe some sort of a depth add. For New Jersey, maybe try and add another center still. For the Islanders, maybe try and move Palmieri or Pajot. For the Rangers, maybe try and move Kreider or Miller if it makes sense. For the Flyers, move Ristolainen if it makes sense. For the Penguins, maybe try and move a guy like Raquel if it makes sense, or a guy like Achari, or a guy like Grzelcyk. And for Capitals, maybe add like something on the depth side of things. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. No official updates on those trades as of yet. Just going over to see if anything else is happening here. Hold on a minute. Let's see. Just give me a minute here. Yeah, it doesn't think anything else is right now. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see anything else right now. Apparently, according to Frank Saravalli, Carolina is also getting a 2026 and 2027 third-round pick in the deal with the first-round picks and Stankoven. So it seems that could be a really big deal. Not exactly sure if it's gone through yet or not, but interesting note how that happens. The Carolina Hurricanes definitely took a step back. So with how it sits right now, let's just go through what's happened so far and see where I see these teams improving. So if you look at how these teams look compared to last week or last month, Florida, a lot better. Their big holes on the blue line, acquired Seth Jones, also added some depth up front, changed up the goaltending side on the backup. So I think they're a lot better than they were a little while ago. For Toronto, top 9 ad was a really good piece for them, and then you got Scott Laughton, so that's a really good piece there for the Leafs, getting Scott Laughton. That's not too surprising. I really do like that ad there for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and do think that improves them. Tampa, Bjorkstrand, Gord, top 9 forwards. As much as it pains me to say this, they got a whole bunch better. So interesting note there. But the Bolts, Panthers, Leafs at this point have all improved. Capitals only acquired Beauvillier at this point, but I think they don't want to tinker too much with that team, so I'm not too surprised by that. Devils and Hurricanes, I don't know what they're doing, but they need to start getting going. If the Bolts, if the Panthers, if the Leafs are improving this much, you want to see Carolina and Jersey improve a little bit as well. Like, I know Carolina moved Mikko Rantanen, got Stankoven back, but I want to see him acquire one more player before the trade day ends. I want to see Jersey trying to acquire one more player, especially with Jack Hughes injured. So I'm looking at those two teams. When it comes to the wildcard teams, Columbus, depth add Luke Cunnin. Ottawa makes a surprising swap of Norris for Cozens. Rangers moving off their pending UFAs and acquiring some of the longer-term pieces if it makes sense. Montreal potentially still holding on to UFAs. I think they should try and trade those guys. Penguins in full sell mode right now. Flyers in full sell mode right now. Sabres want to be in sell mode, but they're not getting very much on the players that they're shopping around, so I'm not exactly sure what they'll do here. Islanders are in full sell mode, even though they're trying to keep Kyle Palmieri. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Detroit's trying to add a couple of pieces. So I'm not sure exactly what we'll see over the next 9-8 minutes before the trade deadline ends. We're going to have to wait and see what happens there. When it comes to the Western side, Dallas, add Rantanen, add Granlund, add Ceci. Much better than they were a little while ago. Colorado, even though they got rid of Rantanen, add Natchez, add Nelson, add Coyle, add Lindgren. Like, that team, miles better. Minnesota, add Nyquist, add Brazeau. A little bit better, but due to cap constraints, they really can't do much, so I'm not going to fault them for that. Winnipeg, add Shen, add Tanev. Not as much of an improvement as Dallas or Colorado, but still a really big improvement there from where they were a little while ago. When it comes to the Pacific side, Vegas. What are they doing? They have not done anything yet except for reacquire Riley Smith. That can't be everything, so I wouldn't be surprised if they did something. Edmonton, add Trent Frederick, add Jake Wallman. They are a little bit better of a team. Add LA Kings, add Andrei Kuzmenko, a little bit better of a team. When it comes to the wildcard teams, like Calgary, acquired Fairbairn Frost. Vancouver moved Susie, acquired Marcus Pettersson, moved JT Miller. Utah kept all the UFAs around. St. Louis really didn't do much, acquired Cam Fowler early in the year. So I'm not exactly sure if this is all the moves we'll see. There's 7-ish minutes left before the trade deadline happens, so we'll get to all the stuff that's happening over the next little while. And definitely don't forget to stay tuned. Leave a comment down in the chat below. Leave a comment. Love to hear your guys' opinion on all of this and what your opinions on all of this was too. So interesting note there. Okay, so I think we're still good. Sorry guys if that was a little bit of a mishap. I might have accidentally pressed out of it. So if the stream cuts out, I'm sorry, but just trying to do everything else too. So just keep in mind we got some more interesting things to talk about here. Let's see if there's any more interesting moves. Let's see. Not right now. Let's see if there's anything on. Let's see if anything on Twitter's happening right now. Let's see. Hold on a minute here. There might be something when it comes to Vegas happening. Like I said, Frank Cervelli says trade talks are picking up. Not exactly sure what else is happening at the point in time. Yeah, so we're about 5 minutes away from the trade deadline ending. So the very likely chance we could see some interesting things happen. Not exactly sure what will happen over the next couple of minutes. I'll be with you guys for another about half an hour, so long as my stream doesn't cut out, and then we'll see what happens after that. So interesting out there. Like I said, leave a chat, leave a comment. Love to hear your guys' opinion on all that was discussed here today. So interesting stuff from happening over the past little while. Let's see if there's any confirmation on more moves. Not yet, not that I can see at least. Yeah, still all those moves that we were talking about earlier. So what's your biggest move so far this year's trade deadline? Like, mine's got to be the Bjorkstrand one. I was not expecting the Bjorkstrand one. Nelson is also a big trade there. Cousins for Norris, that's an interesting swap I was not expecting coming. I do wonder what else we could see here in the next little while. Like, if you look at my top 20 trade bait list, if you look at the players who are still on it, let's see. You've got Shen, you've got Donato, you've got Besser, you've got Zegras, you've got McCann, you've got Marchand, you've got Raquel, you've got Kreider, Dobson, Geeky, you've got Ferraro, you've got Savard, you've got Provorov, and you've got Tuck. So I'm not sure if any of these guys are going to wind up being moved. We'll have to wait and see. Definitely going to be interesting to see. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But definitely, it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. Don't forget to stay tuned. I'll probably have a couple of recap videos either later today or tomorrow. So don't forget to stay tuned for that after my live stream. I'm not exactly sure how long it'll be after, so stay tuned for that. We're going to have a whole bunch of trade recaps. I plan on having a fan reaction on the trade rumors, on the trade deadline about next week, probably around Tuesday-ish. So don't forget to stay tuned for that. And I'll be trying to recap all the moves that happened over the past while. Probably going to be doing like a full trade grades as well, seeing how these teams did. Going back to how much changes were made for these teams in season. So I'm probably going to do a full trade grade for all of these teams, seeing how they did. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there, but nothing really new as of right now. Let's see. Nope, still Milstead deal was the last official deal that had come in. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with this one. Let's see if there's any other thing. There's 3 minutes until the trade deadline. 3, that's it. 3 minutes. And then the GMs have to put their phones down. So we'll see if there's anything else happening. Let's see. Anything else seeming to be happening? I really can't see anything else right now. Vegas's Twitter account just text hi on their Twitter account. That's got a lot of people thinking maybe Vegas is up to something. I do wonder if there's a possibility we could see a Vegas deal in the not too distant future. We know Vegas loves to do big trades at the very latest possible moment. We're 2 minutes away, so there's going to be a couple of trades here that trickle down, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. I do wonder what else we could be seeing. So still, just all the moves we've been hearing about. I don't know what else we could be seeing here. But we do have a couple of interesting trades that happen. Just recapping quickly here as we're nearing the trade deadline. Earlier today, here's what we've seen. Washington has acquired Anthony Beauvillier from the Penguins for a 2025 second-round pick. The LA Kings have acquired Andrei Kuzmenko from the Philadelphia Flyers with 50% of his contract retained for a 2025 seventh-round pick, and along with the 2025 seventh-round pick for a 2027 third-round pick. The Ottawa Senators have acquired Dylan Cousins, Dylan Gambrell, and 2026 second-round pick from Buffalo for Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker. The Winnipeg Jets have acquired Luke Shen from the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for a second and fourth-round pick. The Jets have also acquired Brandon Tanev from Seattle for a second-round pick. The Detroit Red Wings have acquired Peter Mrazek and Craig Smith from Chicago for Joseph Veleno, and the Boston Bruins have acquired Casey Mittelstadt, a 2025 second-round pick, and William Zellers from the Avalanche for Charlie Coyle and a 2026 fifth-round pick. So those are all the moves we've seen from our past little while. Nothing updated as of yet. I'm sure with us being only a minute away from the trade deadline, we'll have more things, interesting things talking about here, so don't forget to stay tuned for that. We are going to be with you for about another 30 minutes as it's officially 1 o'clock Mountain Time. The trade deadline's here. The phones have to be settled down. There are obviously going to be probably the 5, 10, 15 trades that are going to be trickling down after the trade deadline, along with those official announcements on what those trade packages are for those few teams that we were talking about. But interesting note there that we do have this. So interesting to see there. At this point, I don't know exactly what else we're doing. I really don't know what else is going on in this one here. Yeah, still no updates here. There'll be a couple more updates over the next handful of minutes. So at this point, who are my winners and losers of trade deadline? Well, let's see. For the buyer side, the winners, in my opinion, I gotta say Dallas is a winner. Acquiring Rantanen, extending Johnston, making all those other moves they did. Dallas has become a juggernaut. I think they're a winner. Colorado's a winner, given the fact Coyle, Nelson, they acquired Nate just earlier in the year. Lindgren, like that is a playoff-style, playoff-built team. Imagine if Dallas went against Colorado in the first round. That would be lethal and a bloodbath of a first round. When it comes to the other sides, I don't really think anyone else is a winner. Vegas hasn't done much unless they do something now. Edmonton hasn't done much. I know Frederick and Wallman are decent additions, but I don't think that really hugely improves them. Kuzmenko's a decent addition, but I don't think it hugely improves the Kings. When it comes to the other Central Division teams, Winnipeg hasn't had an overly great trade deadline. Neither has the Minnesota Wild. So another Wilder because of cap constraints, but still, you want to see him do a little bit more here. In the Atlantic Division, I think all of them are basically winners. Florida and Tampa for sure are very good winners here at the trade deadline. So I think the four winners buyers-wise are Colorado, Dallas, Florida, and Tampa, unless something big goes down just before this trade deadline winds up passing. On top of that, what else could we see here? On the seller side, like Pittsburgh, I gotta think's a winner. They're moving pieces, getting a lot of picks. They're looking really good. Seattle's looking really good with all of their picks that they're getting. San Jose did a masterclass of a deal to trade Wallman. I gotta think they're a winner here on the seller side. On top of that, Sabres aren't doing overly great. Chicago could have done better. Nashville actually doing pretty good on the seller side too. So we'll have to wait and see what else happens here. But I expect more trades to trickle down over the next little while. But the trade deadline has passed. We are at 12:02 p.m. Pacific time, 1:02 p.m. Mountain time, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But interesting note there that that's all happened so far. Let's see if there's any pieces of news here. Okay, so according to Columbus Blue Jackets, they're saying that the Luke Cunnin deal is Luke Cunnin for a 4th-round pick, which isn't too bad. I think moving a 4th-round pick with right on the standings right now is not too bad. Apparently, according to it sounds like Elliot Freeman is mentioning that Brad Marchand could be dealt to Florida. That could be an interesting pickup there for the Panthers. Not sure what the Bruins are getting in return. According to Frank Saravalli, he says that the Blackhawks kept Donato and Maroon, so they didn't move either of those guys. So Donato, who's number 2 on my list, is not going to get moved. Interesting note there. Let's see what else happens. I don't know what else here. Let's see. Imagine Marchand in Florida. Like, the Panthers are gearing up to go on another cup run. I don't know exactly what else is going to happen here. It sounds like Marchand, it sounds like Boeser was not dealt. So number 2, number 3 on my trade bait list were not dealt, it seems like, by the trade deadline. So Boeser's going to stay in Vancouver for the Canucks' current playoff run. And it sounds like Donato's going to stay in Chicago and potentially work out a contract extension. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. What else could we be seeing here? Let's see. Not really seeing much else here right now. Like I said, a very likely chance that over the next 10 to 15 minutes we'll see some trades trickle down. So stay with me until then. Might stay a little bit longer after 1:30, depending on how many moves wind up trickling down. But we'll definitely get to all these deals. And any deals that do happen after I end the live stream, I will touch on my recap videos later on. So definitely don't forget to stay tuned for that. At this point, we've got some interesting pieces here that could wind up being happening. I don't know what else we're looking at here. Just waiting here for more updates when it comes to potentially seeing some other things. No. Yeah, I don't really see anything else here yet, but remember, things always trickle down, and we still have the official confirmation on the Rantanen deal and other things like that. So we're 6 minutes past the trade deadline. We'll have to wait and see what other things happen here. So still nothing else here when it comes to confirmed deals. Yeah, nothing else here, it seems like, at this point in time. But we've seen a whole bunch of interesting moves. A handful of players who were on my trade bait board have been moved. Let's just go through a rundown of the players who we know have been moved. Who's been moved? Let's see. So, Braden Shen, it sounds like he's going to stay in St. Louis. Ryan Donato sounds like he's going to stay in Chicago. Boeser sounds like he's going to stay in Vancouver. Rantanen sounds like he got dealt to Dallas. Zegras, haven't heard about him. So he's still there in Anaheim. Lon sounds like he was dealt to Toronto. Nelson, we already talked about, was dealt to Colorado. McCann sounds like he's probably staying in Seattle. Kunin, he was dealt to Columbus. Cozens was dealt to Ottawa. Marchand, I'm not sure if he got dealt or not. Sounds like he could be dealt to Florida. Tanev was dealt to Winnipeg. Raquel, maybe he got dealt. We don't know yet, but he's still on the board. So is Chris Kreider. So is Noah Dobson. Morgan Geeky's also on the board. Wonder if he got dealt. Mario Ferraro is also on the board. Wonder if he got dealt. He was drawing a lot of interest. David Savard in Montreal is still on the board. Wonder if he got dealt. Ivan Provorov probably wasn't going to get dealt. Neither was Alex Tuch. 21 on my list was Ryan Strome. He didn't get dealt, I don't think. Ryan O'Reilly was 22. I don't think he got dealt. John Gibson was 23. I don't think he got dealt. Brazil, we already talked about, was been dealt to Minnesota. Domi was 25. I don't think he got dealt. Michelli was 26. I don't think he got dealt. Miller was 27. I don't think he got dealt. Norris was 28. He got dealt to Buffalo. Ristolainen was 29th. I don't think he got dealt. Susie, we already talked about, went to New York. 31 was Paul Mary. Sounds like he's staying in New York. Armina, 32. Wonder if he got dealt. Milstead 33, he was the one who was dealt to Boston. Carlo 34, wonder if he got dealt. Kane 35, wonder if he got dealt. Heinola with 36, wonder if he got dealt. Luke Shen, who with 37, went to Winnipeg, so interesting note there. Beauvillier with 38, he went to Washington. Bichelle with 39, he went to Dallas. He's still in Dallas, probably will stay there. 40th was Tarasenko, 41st was Nemec, 42nd was Perron, and 43rd was Lozon. I think all those guys wound up staying there. So interesting note there. Some interesting things that we're seeing over the past little while. Leave your chat, comment down below. Love your guys' opinion on all that was discussed here today. I'll be with you for, God willing, about the next 20-25 minutes, seeing what will happen there. So we'll see what happens with all those things. Let's see, is there any more updates when it comes to trades? No. Let's see about here. Hold on. Let's see. Apparently, Brad Marchand is being dealt to the Florida Panthers. 11 off my trade value list is gone, and I was not expecting Florida to pick him up. I wonder what that deal is going to look like. So Marchand's going to be in Florida. Interesting note there. The trade call is still pending, but it does seem like Florida's going to get Brad Marchand. Florida looking like they're going to gear up for another playoff run as well. Let's see what else is happening here. Frank Chevalier says that Carolina did not make any more moves, which, if that's true, I really do hurt for Hurricanes fans. I don't think they got better this trade deadline. I think they got worse, and I don't think they're going to go very far in the playoffs this year. If it really is Carolina, New Jersey, that's going to be like one of the worst first-round matchups this year. So, interesting note there. Bruce Garriott says that the Sens did have a deal pending that just beat the deadline, he thinks. So we might be seeing another Ottawa Senators trade. It doesn't sound like the Canucks made any sorts of moves. So it sounds like Brock Besser's staying, Pius Suter's staying. They're probably just going to try and make the playoffs with the current group they have, which I think it might be a smart move. And maybe they wind up signing Besser to a new deal. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Apparently, according to Eric Engels, the Habs have no more deals in the queue. They are done for the day. So it doesn't look like they moved Savard. It doesn't look like they moved Armia for a team that was speculated to be moving a whole bunch of players going into the deadline. They didn't really move anything. So interesting note there. The Habs looked like they stood pat this time and didn't really do much here. So interesting note there. Still going away on some of these moves here. See what happens. It seems like Brad Marchand is going to Florida, which is surprising. So it sounds like Ottawa's got a trade at some point. It sounded like Vegas had something going. It sounded like Brad Marchand's going to Florida. We still don't know the exact returns for Kunin, for Rantanen, for Lawton, for... there was one other trade there too that I didn't exactly know yet. So we'll see what happens there, but... definitely some interesting trades that have happened this year at the trade deadline. We're now 11 minutes past the trade deadline. We'll see if anything has been confirmed yet. There has been another confirmed deal. Okay, so the official trade is as follows. The San Jose Sharks are acquiring St. Louis Blues 2025 4th-round pick from the Blue Jackets in exchange for Luke Kunin. So this is an interesting move there. Kunin was never going to be brought back by San Jose. Wanted a fresh start to go chase some... chase a playoff spot somewhere in a competitive situation. The Jackets take the entire capital of Luke Kunin, which they can do because they have the capacity to do so. The Sharks get a 4th-round pick for a depth forward who wasn't going to be brought back. So, interesting note there, but Luke Kunin has been dealt to the Columbus Blue Jackets for a 4th-round pick. So, an interesting trade there, and a really smart move there from the Blue Jackets to get Kunin. So interesting note there. Nothing else as it sits right now, but the Jackets do acquire Luke Kunin. So interesting note there. We're waiting for the other signings that moves that happened earlier today, just before the trade deadline happened. So we'll see what else happens here. According to Chris Johnston, the Toronto Maple Leafs are acquiring Brandon Carlo. Okay, that's another massive deal. I thought Carlo could have been traded. He was on my trade bait board. I thought it was a very unlikely scenario. He's being dealt. Carlo is going from Boston to Toronto. So Boston just sent Brandon Carlo to Toronto and Brad Marchand to Florida. Boston is embracing the seller mentality. They are probably not going to make the playoffs this year at this point. So, interesting note there. But it does sound like Carlo's going to Toronto. Wow, that's going. I wonder what these returns are for Toronto and for Florida are going to give Boston. Like that's huge. Like imagine having Marchand and that, like whoever plays 2-3 in the Atlantic is going to beat each other up. Like that's going to be a hard fought 7-game series. Like whoever wins the first spot in the Atlantic Division is going to be thanking God for getting them the first spot in the Atlantic. They're going to, the second and third place team in the Atlantic are going to beat each other up. Right now I think it's Toronto and Tampa. It could wind up being Florida and Tampa. It could wind up being Florida and Toronto. Whoever plays in that second round, the first round series, and second and third in the Atlantic, that is going to be a brutal series. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. Still more trades trickling down. But it sounds like Carlo's going to Toronto. Boston just said, we don't care about in-division trades. We don't care about selling pieces. They want to go full sell mode. According to Chris Johnston as well, he says that Boston's acquiring Anton Lundell and draft picks as part of the Brad Marchand deal. Okay, I can see why they would want to move Marchand. If they are getting Lundell, that's a massive pickup there for the Boston Bruins. Lundell was supposed to be the future second-line center for the Panthers. That could be a really good haul there for the Panthers. Let's see what else. Anything else happening? Nothing I can see here. Let's see if there's any sorts of moves here. No official moves as of yet. So on the stream, maybe about 15 minutes. If none of those deals have been gone yet, then maybe I'll wait a little bit longer. But we do have a really interesting thing here. So Canucks, Canes, Habs seem to be done for the day. I'm really hurting for Canes fans. I'm really hoping that Boeser's going to be able to sign an extension for the Canucks and he doesn't walk his UFA, and that's a missed opportunity. And for the Habs, what are we going to get like from Savard? Like a second round pick? Armia was going to get like a third round pick. Maybe it's better to just keep those guys, let them walk as UFAs, and keep them around to help them with this playoff run that the Habs are on right now. Not really sure what else is going to be here. Bruce Garrett says that the Senators have a trade that they need to do. According to, we're going another trade here between the Hawks Bruce Garrett is mentioning that the Senators are trying to acquire Fabian Zetterlund from San Jose. I have no idea why the Sharks would do that, but as a Senators fan, I would love if that happened. And according to a couple of recent reports, it sounds like Chicago and Utah have made a trade. Chicago is acquiring Shea Weber's contract, which I think has 2 or 3 more years left, which can be LTIR'd, Aku Ratu, and the rights to Victor Soderstrom from Utah in exchange for a 2026 5th-round pick. So that's a small move there. It just frees up the LTIR space that Utah was in, and it just frees up a contract that Utah didn't need to have. As a bottom dweller, the Hawks have a whole bunch of space. They can keep him. They get Aku Ratu, who's a decent bottom 6 forward, and signing rights to Victor Soderstrom, who can I still think be a solid third-pair defenseman for a 5th-round pick. So that's interesting. Let's see if there's any updates here. Not at the moment, by the looks of things. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But big news, Carlo is heading to Toronto, Marchand heading to Florida, Zetterlund maybe heading to Ottawa, and we have a couple more trades that seem to be trickling down. So let's double check and see if there's any more news here. Apparently, Erik Johnson's heading back to Colorado, according to Elliot Friedman. He says that the Colorado Avalanche have reacquired Erik Johnson from the Philadelphia Flyers. Wonder what the sort of deal winds up happening. Interesting to note there. Like, we've seen a really interesting trades here. Like, I very likely think that the Boston Bruins are Most likely. Like, if you look at the teams who made moves here, unless they go on surprising runs, Islanders probably not going to make the playoffs. Penguins probably not going to make the playoffs. Flyers probably not going to make the playoffs. Sabres probably not going to make the playoffs. And Bruins probably not going to make the playoffs. So you have 5 teams probably around there who are going to fight for those last 2 playoff spots with the way that the deadline's shaping up. That's Ottawa, that's Columbus, that's Detroit, the Rangers, and the Habs. Those are probably the 5 teams looking at for those last 2 playoff spots in the Eastern Conference with the way the deadline shaped up. Like, I think Pittsburgh's going to probably tank. I think the Islanders are probably going to tank. I think Bruins going to falter a little bit. They've already played more games than everyone else. I think Philadelphia is going to tank. And I definitely think that the Sabres are already in tank mode right now. So, interesting note there. But we do have some interesting trades that have happened from our past little while. Just looking at some more things that could be happening. Let's see. I don't see anything else right now, especially nothing on the deals. So we'll see what happens here. Let's just refresh this, see if there's anything else. Nope, still Kunin to the Jackets for a 4th. So still don't know the exact return for the Rantanen deal. Still don't know the exact return for the Lawton deal. Still don't know the exact return for the Carlo deal, for the Marchand deal. Zetterlund sounds like he's going to Ottawa. So we still have more trades to talk about that are going to be happening here. It seems like, according to Pierre LeBrun, Glass was the other one that we weren't know. It sounds like Glass is going to New Jersey for a 3rd round pick and some minor league player. Interesting note there. Don't know what else are going to happen here over the next couple of minutes. Let's see. So interesting. We'll see what else happens here. I don't see anything else right now. So interesting. Let's see if there's any more updates that have been happening. Nope, not yet. So interesting note there. Not exactly sure who else we're playing with right now. Exactly who could wind up being traded. Like, Vegas seemed like they were going to do something. Not sure if they did or not. I may be out a little bit longer here to doing some more things. I might stay on a little bit longer if there's no updates here when it comes to all these trades. Let's see. Nothing right now. Still waiting on some of these bigger trades to see what these returns are. Let's see. Really don't see anything else right now. So I'm a little bit surprised that the Canucks let Besser walk. So in the Central Division, I think Colorado and Dallas are the favorites. In the Atlantic Division, I gotta think all 3 of the Atlantic Division teams are the favorites at this point. I know Washington and Winnipeg are having such good years, but after the additions that those 5 teams made, those teams have to be the favorites right now. I think it would be lucky for one of the wildcard teams to wind up upsetting one of the division winners, unless you have Dallas versus Colorado or Colorado versus Winnipeg. That's probably the only possibility I could see where a wildcard team in Colorado could wind up making some really big noise in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see, like, did Vegas do anything? Did Edmonton do anything? Did LA do anything? Was Minnesota involved in anything? Like, there's got to be a couple more things that are happening here. You got to think at least. Interesting out there. I don't know what else we're doing here. There's still so many big moves here that are going in right now. So we got more things to talk about in the next little bit. How about we just recap here some of the moves that happened earlier today. So the Capitals kicked things off today by acquiring Anthony Beauvillier for a 2nd round pick from Pittsburgh. Then we saw the LA Kings acquire Andrei Kuzmenko in a 7th round pick from the Flyers for a 3rd round pick, and the Flyers retained half of Kuzmenko's contract. Then we saw Ottawa and Buffalo make a massive one with Dennis Gilbert, Dylan Cousins, and a 2026 second round pick going to Ottawa for Norris and Bernard Docker. Then we saw Luke Schenn go to Winnipeg for a 2026 second and a 2027 fourth round pick. So interesting note there. Then we saw a 2027 second round pick go to Seattle for Brandon Tanev, who goes to Winnipeg. So that's a really good pickup there for the Jets. Veleno went to Chicago, and in exchange, Detroit got Mrazek and Craig Smith. So a little bit of goaltending insurance. Then we saw the Boston Bruins acquire Casey Middlestad, a 2025 second rounder, and young prospect William Zellers from the Avalanche for Charlie Coyle and a 2026 fifth round pick. And then we saw Luke Cunnin be dealt to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a fourth round pick that's going to the San Jose Sharks. So those are all the trades we've seen from over the past little while. We've got a couple more minutes here on our stream that I'll keep on touching on some things here. So some interesting trades. So we'll see what happens here. Let's see if there's any more news from over the past little while. Apparently, Buffalo might, if it got done in time according to Darren Dreger, send a Jokiharju to the Boston Bruins. So we'll see if that happens. According to Frank Seravalli, Montreal has kept Armia and Savard. So it's an interesting move there for the Canadiens. Like Armia and Savard, they're decent veterans. Savard is a solid second pair right shot defenseman, and Armia is a solid bomb six guy. I guess they weren't getting overly great offers in return for him, and decided that it's probably better for the younger guys to go and play some meaningful games in late March and early April than it is to trade those guys away. So we'll see how that goes for Montreal, and we'll see what else happens here. Don't know if anything else is happening here. It sounds like Zetterlund's going to Ottawa. Sounds like Carlo's going to Toronto. Marchand's going to Florida as long as those deals got in time. So we'll see if those deals did happen. We talked about Rantanen, Lawton. There's another one there too, Glass, that haven't been officially announced yet. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I might just do some of these announcements during a update that I'll do either later today or tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see. Not exactly sure what will happen here. Depends. I might be on here for another 20 minutes, depending on how long these trades wind up trickling down. It'll be interesting to see. Like that Florida Panthers team, it's going to be extremely lethal for the playoffs. Like Panthers have a really strong chance here to go back to back and go to 3 straight cup finals. So interesting note there. Toronto made a couple interesting moves. So we'll have to wait and see there. Like there's a couple of really intriguing moves here. Like even Ottawa, like acquiring Zetterlund, if that is what ended up happening before the trade deadline, that could be a really good pickup there for the Senators. I do like Zetterlund as like a solid third line forward there for Ottawa to provide some depth scoring for that Senators team. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens here. Still nothing when it comes to official trades. So we have to wait and see there. Not exactly sure what else happens here. Like, what was your surprising move? So the official moves that we've seen that are, at least I can see here, are Kunins went to Columbus, Middlestad's been swapped for Coyle between Boston and Colorado, Veleno's gone to Chicago for Mrazek and Smith, a second round pick went to Seattle for Brandon Tanev, which went to Winnipeg. Winnipeg also acquired Luke Schenn for a second round pick and a fourth round pick. Cozens, Gilbert, and a second round pick went to Ottawa for Bernard Docker and Norris. Kuzmenko, 50% of his contract retained, and a seventh round pick went to LA for a third round pick. And Beauvillier went to Washington for a second round pick. Which of those moves were the most surprising to you? Was it the Cozens deal? Was it Kuzmenko going to LA? Was it Winnipeg getting Schenn and Tanev? Was it Chicago getting Veleno? Was it Middlestad getting swapped for Coyle? Was it Cunnin being dealt to Columbus? Definitely to get thoughts on all of that. What do you think, and what is your biggest opinions on all those things? Still no official announcements on all those trades yet. Have to wait and see what happens there. See what else we can see here. See. Bruce Garriott says that going the other way might be Zach Ostapchuk. So that's interesting. Ostapchuk's been a decent bottom six addition there for the Senators this year. So we'll have to wait and see on that. So interesting note there. I'm not exactly sure what interesting stuff is. Like, the Bruins gotta miss the playoffs now. Like, that's an 8 straight years that they have made the playoffs, and that's probably likely going to come to an end now. So it's the end of the year in Boston. They're going to miss the playoffs, most likely. Once again, not everything's done until it's done, but most likely for the first time in a long period of time. Gotta think more moves are coming that trickled in. There always is. Let's see. Interesting note there. I don't know what else happens today. Like, I'll stay on for another 15 minutes. If something happens, I'll maybe stay on for longer, but I think I'll just stay on for another 15 minutes. If nothing else happens, then we'll let the trade slide through, and I'll do some trade recaps later on in the day or tomorrow. So that's probably what I'm going to do here. Thanks for all of you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Really does help out the channel. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. So if you can, it really does help out the channel. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming up over today, tomorrow, talking about these deals that are going down today. So definitely got some interesting moves that are going to be happening. I don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but it sounds like there's probably going to be a couple more moves. Jokiharju to Boston, Carlo to Toronto, Marchand to Florida. Like, Boston's going full resell, retool mode. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens here. Like I said, I'll try and stay with you guys for the next 15 minutes. If something big happens, we'll see. If not, then we'll have to wait and see. So, interesting note there. Yeah, so it seems like Utah's acquired a 5th or 6th round pick for Soderstrom, Maratu, and Weber. It sounds like Kovacevic is being extended by New Jersey Devils. Sounds like a 5-year extension with AV of $4 million. Interesting note there. That could be an interesting pickup there for the Devils. I don't know exactly what else is happening here. I think after that Boston loss yesterday against Carolina, I think they've officially figured out that they're not going to make the playoffs this year. I think the Bruins are finally coming to terms with the fact that they're a very lucky chance they're going to miss the playoffs this year, and that's why I started making all these big moves. Okay, so the one more trade has officially come through. I can talk about this one now. Okay, so the Chicago Blackhawks acquired Shea Weber contract, which has this year and next year left at $7.85 million, youngster Aku Ratu, and signing rights of Victor Soderstrom from the Utah Hockey Club in exchange for a 2026 6th-round pick. So Soderstrom was not getting very much time and fell out of favor to the point where he wasn't offered a contract extension by Utah. Aku Ratu is a solid AHLer, but he's not more than that right now, and will be an RFA at the end of the contract. And Shea Weber is retired. Like, he's just on long-term injury reserve. He's a long-term injury reserve player, so the Hawks can put him on injury reserve for the rest of next year, and then his contract's up. So the Hawks give up a 6th-round pick to acquire dead cap and a couple of decent young players in Soderstrom and Ratu. Ratu might be eventually a decent 4th liner, maybe. We'll have to wait and see. Soderstrom, I think, could still be a solid 3rd pair of defensemen. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but the Hawks and Utah have made a trade involving those two teams. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Let's see if there's any last minute deals that happen. According to Elliot Friedman, he says that the Ottawa Senators deals as follows. Zetterlund, Robbins, and a 4th-round pick have been dealt to Ottawa for Ostapchuk, Gregor, and a 2025 2nd-round pick. So this is interesting. Ostapchuk had fell in well as like a decent bottom 6 forward, and Gregor, really good, solid guy who can be a gel type guy. And they also move a 2nd-round pick in this year's draft. In exchange, you get a 4th-round pick, not sure when, Robbins, and Zetterlund. That's a pretty decent move there for Ottawa. They're getting some solid upgrades on the forward group. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Like, I really do like this team now. I think Ottawa has had a pretty solid day when they get a little bit younger with the Cousins deal, and they get a solid top 9 forward in Zetterlund. So interesting note there. Like I said, at this point in time, I don't see any of these moves. Like, at this point in time, I really don't see much else that I can do. I'll stay on for about 10 minutes and then I'll sign off if there are any sort of trades trickle down, any more that I haven't mentioned yet, or any that wind up trickling down as well that we haven't mentioned the full trades yet. We will wind up talking about it. So interesting note there. Still the Blackhawks, still the last one. So interesting note there. Like, I'm surprised. Like, Bruins got to be a winner at this point, given the fact of how much they're selling. Like I said, I don't know what the official returns are for Carlo, for Marchand, what they gave up for Jokiharju, if that deal did go through. But the Bruins have made a lot of really stellar moves right now, and I think they're going to be one of the teams who probably want to be one of my winners in this year's trade deadline list. So, interesting note there. I'll have to wait and see what other moves wind up happening. Not exactly sure if any of them do. So, interesting note there. Let's see what else is happening. Like, it sounds like Erik Johnson's going back to Colorado. I don't know what else is happening here. Let's see. I really don't know what else we could do here. Not much stuff to talk about. Like we said, Marchand's going to Florida. It sounds like Lundell and draft picks are the return. According to a couple of recent reports, Carlo's going to Toronto. It sounds like Ottawa's getting Zetterlund. Sounds like San Jose. Sounds like Buffalo's moving Jokiharju. Sounds like Colorado's moving Erik Johnson. Sounds like a couple of other things could be happening as well. So not exactly sure what all these will wind up happening and wind up being, but interesting note there. Like, if we look at some more, yeah. So at this point in time, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 trades that happened today, like after I woke up, after like about 6 a.m. And there's a couple of more, like Rantanen's still deal. Rantanen was dealt, Lawton was dealt, Glass was dealt, Jokiharju was dealt, Zetterlund was dealt, Carlo was dealt, Marchand was dealt. There's a couple of other interesting ones. So maybe there's a couple more that come through, like Vegas. You gotta think they did something. I'm not exactly sure. So, I mean, I'm not seeing anything on Vegas. I'm not seeing anything on Los Angeles. Like, I'm not sure what everyone else did. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens there. But interesting to note there that we don't really have anything here. I'll stay on with you guys for the next 10 minutes. Really, nothing else to talk about until some of these trades officially go through. So we'll have to wait and see if these do wind up going through in the not too distant future. Like, I don't know what the biggest trade was. Probably going to be the Cousins one. The Rantanen one was pretty big. Lawton going to Toronto is pretty big. Marchand going to Florida, of all teams, is pretty big. Carlo going to Toronto is pretty big. Not exactly sure what other deals are huge, monumental ones. Nelson last night was a pretty big one. So Wallman to Edmonton, that was another big one. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens there. But that's some interesting pieces from over the past little while, and hopefully we'll see. So just to recap here, while I'm finishing up this right now. So Schenn was number 1, sounds like he stayed. Donato was number 2, sounds like he stayed. Besser was number 3, sounds like he stayed. Rantanen's dealt to Dallas. Zegras probably stayed. Lawton was dealt to Toronto. Nelson was dealt to Colorado. McCann sounds like he stayed. Kunin was dealt to Columbus, and Cousins was dealt to Ottawa. Marchand was dealt to Florida. Tanev was dealt to Winnipeg. Raquel sounds like he stayed. Kreider sounds like he stayed. Dobson sounds like he stayed. Let's see, Morgan Geekie probably stayed, sounds like right now. Farrell probably stayed. David Savard, Provorov, Tuck, like, I don't know any more moves that are happening right now, so. It sounds like the Blues also didn't make any sort of moves, so. Yeah, it sounds like the Blues didn't make any moves, so it sounds like Schenn's going to stay in St. Louis, and Bennington's going to stay in St. Louis. So, I don't know what else is going to happen here, but we'll be interested to see what else happens over the next little while. I'll stay on for about 5 more minutes, And if nothing else comes, then I'll just do some recaps later on to the day. So interesting note there. Don't know exactly what else is going to happen here. Just don't know exactly what else happens. Not exactly sure what else is happening right now. So, like I said, winners, buyers-wise right now, I would say the Stars, the Avalanche, the Panthers, Leafs, and the Bolts, all 5 made extraordinarily good improvements this year that made this team lethal. On top of that, when you look at the other things, seller-wise, I gotta think Boston's pretty happy with how they've done this today. I gotta think Pittsburgh's pretty happy with how they've done today. I gotta think, oh boy, what else? Islanders are probably pretty happy by moving Brock Nelson. San Jose, with the way that they've been working right now, I gotta think they're pretty good with the seller side of things. I don't know about any other teams. Nashville maybe a little bit happier with the moves that they've made. So interesting note there. We got some interesting stuff that happened from our past little while. Let's see. Not exactly anything else here. Stay on about 5 more minutes and we'll see what else happens. Let's see. Like, Carlo being added to that defense is great. Like, you have Riley, Carlo, McCabe, Tanev, OEL Myers. Like, that's a lethal defensive core in Toronto. So, interesting note there. Apparently, according to Pierre LeBrun, Raquel has stayed put in Pittsburgh. So, the number 13 person on my trade bait list is staying put. So, interesting note there. He did not get moved. Not exactly sure what else. Like, Besser stayed put. Nato stayed put. Raquel stayed put. I don't think Kreider or Dobson got moved. It sounds like Geeky and Ferraro probably stayed. Savard stayed for sure. Tuck probably stayed. Provorov probably stayed. Zegers probably stayed. It sounds like Donato and Besser for sure stayed. It sounds like Shen for sure stayed. So not exactly sure what else we could see here. Not exactly sure what else we're going to see here. About 5 more minutes and then I'm going to call it a stream. So we'll have to wait and see what happens here. Let's see. It sounds like maybe, according to Elliot Friedman, Fraser Minton is part of the deal for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's going to be a really good steal of a deal for the Boston Bruins. Yeah, really nothing here that's happened in the last like 8 minutes when it comes to Elliot Friedman posting something. Let's see. Let's look. Frank Saravalli saying Canes are done, Canucks are done, Hawks are done, Habs are done. Not exactly sure what else we could see here. Let's just go over to the trades. Let's see if there's any updates here. Nope. Okay, so probably gonna sign off in a couple minutes. Yeah, Raquel stays put. Habs kept their UFAs. Marchand to Florida. Already know all of that. Yuki Ryu, no extension for Besser. Okay, so interesting note there. Interesting to see how all of that works out. So seems like nothing else is going to happen at this point in time. Very likely chance that that's all the movement we're going to get to here today. So probably going to sign off now. It was a nice stream. Thanks for all of you for tuning in. Thanks for chatting. After the stream, if you do view it, leave a comment down in the comment section below. Let your guys' opinion on all the trades that happened. I'll have more trades coming out, trade videos over the next day or two, either later today or tomorrow, talking about the trades that I haven't got around to with these separate videos. So if you stay tuned for those ones, as I'll have a lot of interesting videos over the next couple of days, recapping what happened today. If any more trades trickle down, I'll talk about those as well. And on top of that, We're going to have a couple more videos next week. Like, I'm going to have my usually scheduled game recap videos on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm going to have trade rumors or just other videos on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. My power rankings video is going to go on Tuesday. I'm going to plan on having like a fan reaction on Tuesday. So stay tuned for the videos next week. Stay tuned for the videos either later today or tomorrow, as I plan on doing a couple more, discovering all those discussed in today's video, discussing all the trades that happened. But as it sits right now, like, nothing else has been happening since the Marchand, Jokiharju, Zetterlund. Like, I don't see anything else happening at this point in time. So with that in mind, let's just double check here. Yeah, I don't see anything else happening here. So with that in mind, I'm going to sign off. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all the trades that went down so far down in the comment section below. I'll try and do a couple more videos later on today or tomorrow talking about all the videos. All the trades that happened either later last night or today during the trade deadline. So definitely stay tuned for those videos. I hopefully should not take too long to post them. Hopefully maybe later tonight, like I said, or tomorrow at some point. So definitely stay tuned for those ones. Like I said, stay tuned for my videos next week, and I'll get back to my regularly scheduled things on Monday. So interesting note there, but trade deadline's finished. And besides a couple of returns that we don't know about, we saw a couple of really interesting moves today. So definitely leave a comment down in the comment section below. Leave a chat down in the chat below. Let your guys' thoughts on all of this. And what were your opinions on all the moves? Who do you think won the trade deadline? And all this stuff. Leave it down in the chat, comment below. Let your guys' thoughts on all of that. That's all I'm going to talk for today. We're going to like this video. If you're not to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. Would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below. It really does help with the channel. And we're on the road to 500 subscribers. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. If you're watching this, we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of this. And that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Stay tuned for my upcoming videos. I'll see you all in the next video. See you guys soon.